start our agenda, our formal agenda, I wanted to, I wasn't able to get the baseball team on the agenda and reached out to Barry Ritchie, and we all know what happened with him. He's in the hospital recovering, or he's home recovering. But I wanted to give a big shout out to the Charahoe boys baseball team, won the Division II championship. Thank Coach Devereaux and all his efforts, and all the parents that played a big part in it, and all the players. Just don't wait another 52 years.
Can you stand up so we can see the players and the photos?
Yeah, we're
Come on, you guys. Yay!
Because I don't have it on the formal agenda, I can't really go into too much detail after that, but I wanted to at least acknowledge you folks. And thank you for all you did this year, and keep it up.
Yes.
And a great way to end your senior year. Those seniors, what a great way.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go get pizza.
Thank you.
Good night.
Big achievement for a small school. He dominated by some bigger schools. They beat the team that knocked them out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, playing against them.
Well, if anybody wants to spread out, feel free.
Okay, I want to call the Hopkinton Town Council meeting of June 18th to order with a moment of silent meditation and salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up, hearing, zoning amendment and comprehensive plan, future land use map amendment, Rhode Island Solar Renewable Energy LLC. Open a hearing on applications for a zoning ordinance amendment and a comprehensive plan, future land use map amendment filed by Rhode Island Solar Renewable Energy III LLC, 43 Creston Way, Warwick, Rhode Island, 02886, for property owned by George Townsend, Rose Townsend, and Carleen Bowen, trustee, 350 Woodville Alton Road, Hope Valley, for property located at 350 Woodville Alton Road, identified as Assessors Plat 11, Lot 57, Zone RFR 80. Stephen N. Del Ponzo Jr., 18 Grantville Extension, Hope Valley, Rhode Island, 02832, for property located at 18 Grantville Extension, identified as Assessors Plat 15, Lot 11, Zone RFR 80. Paul and Mary DeGiulio, 6 Townsend Road, Hope Valley, Rhode Island, 02832, for property located at 6 Townsend Road, identified as Assessors Plat 11, Lot 57D, also zoned RFR 80. The zoning ordinance amendment is filed in accordance with Section 16 of the zoning ordinances of the Town of Hopkinton as amended. The comprehensive plan amendment is filed in accordance with Chapter 2, Article 2, Division 5, Sections 2 through 116A. The applicant is proposing to change portions of the properties from RFR 80 zone to commercial special zone with a limitation to solar use for the portions of the properties to install a solar array to allow the erection and installation of solar panels to generate approximately 20 megawatts of energy per year, utilizing 97.5 acres of the 97.5 acres of Assessors Plat 11, Lot 57, utilizing 4.8 acres of the 28.5 acres of Assessors Plat 15, Lot 11, and utilizing 2.8 acres of the 5 acres of Assessors Plat 11, Lot 57D. Applicants, yes, again?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, what I think I might do is after, depending on how many witnesses Mr. Nacarado has, after each witness we'll have council discussion or questions for that witness, and then anyone in the public that has a question on that particular witness testimony. It should flow a little better. Yeah. Anyway.
Very well, thank you. First of all, let me clear up something in the application that has changed since we filed the application. no longer an applicant. His property is no longer part of this application and is removed. And that will reduce the amount of acreage that is on the original application and will also reduce the output of the application from, I think it says 20 megawatts. We're down now to 13.75 AC megawatts. So lot 15, assessors plat 15 to lot 11 is no longer in the application. And we are proposing a 4-lot subdivision. The Bowen property that is in a trust.
Can you turn that corner?
We are carving out a lot for the Bowens, 3.9 acres. There's an existing house on it. That is not in the application to change. And then taking the rest of the Bowen property, which would be lot number 4. Lot number 1 would be the Bowen house and 3.9 acres. On Assessors Plat 11, lot 57B, which is the DeLulio property, we are taking the back portion of that property and including it in the application. That's included in lot 4. He ends up with a house. There's an existing house on the lot on 1.8 acres. And we're also creating a lot of the contaminated area, which is the old dump. It's approximately 12.6 acres. And we're doing that only for the purposes of financing, so we don't spook a potential lender that your site, the whole site is contaminated. Just this site is contaminated, and we've introduced Mr. Hoffman, who will explain the remediation of the property. Then there is the big lot, which is 95 acres, and we're reducing that from the 12-acre parcel, and that is now 87 acres. These are 2 wetland areas that are depicted. We are not touching the wetlands. We are not looking for any type of alteration of the existing wetland. Naturally, we haven't done any subdivisions because it all depends upon who. We'll call Mr. Osborne first.
Get a mic for me that I can use.
We're at 1 mic count.
I can certainly speak up, that's no problem.
Well, maybe it's easier for me to speak up. For the record, please, your name and profession, please.
My name is Audie Osgood. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Rhode Island, a couple of other states. I work for Decreed Engineering at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island. Been with them for quite a while.
And you and Mr. Russo from Decreed Engineer have prepared the site plan?
Yes.
Okay. Could you explain?
Yes, sure.
You raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Thank you.
Are the answers you gave to my questions without being sworn in, are they accurate? And
Yes, they are. No changes.
Now, if you would, please, could you explain the existing conditions of the property?
Sure. Mr. Nakarada mentioned the wetlands. They show up a little better on this plan, so I'll just start with those. So it generally drains from west to east. Across here, there's a little drainage way, another one here. The Wood River is off the site 200 feet. I think it's 1,100 feet actually from the edge of the site. Any proposed work on site to the Wood River. access. We have frontage on Townsend Road here and Old Depot Road at the eastern portion of the site, southeastern corner. We've put together a drainage and erosion control plans for the site and submitted those to DEM.
Is there any access from Old Depot Road to the site?
Not currently.
No. And the portion that's close to Old Depot Road, that's in the back of some of the existing residences?
There's an existing residence here, far in Old Depot Road, and opposite of a couple of lots that are on the south side of the road there.
Okay. If you would, could you explain the drainage aspects of the property?
Sure. I guess maybe the overall plan. Sure, we're oriented the same way. So they're not as obvious on this site, but the site, a portion of it drains to the southwest near the frontage here. We're proposing a basin here, a number of small basins around the perimeter of the site, a couple of infiltration trenches, so that we don't have any large detention basins or control devices. We're trying to break it up and control it in smaller areas where possible.
Will all drainage be handled on site?
Yes.
There'll be no drainage on any adjacent properties? Huh?
Correct. We've not, all drainage is proposed on what would be the 2 lots that would be created for the solar. There'd be nothing on the residential lot side.
Now, the so-called lot, for lack of a better term, the landfill lot, you're proposing solar on that lot once it's remediated?
Correct.
Okay. And solar on the solar panels on the large lot?
Correct.
Okay. No solar on the two frontage lots that you're creating?
Correct.
Okay. Aside from drainage aspect, the site plan, does it observe all existing setbacks zoning-wise?
Yes.
And what is the zoning in that particular zone? It's RFR 80. What is the setbacks?
I believe I have those with me. I don't have actually they're right here on no, not on that sheet.
How about if I told you the setback's 25 feet?
Okay,
Is that
that's
right?
what I was thinking,
Yeah.
but I wanted to be certain. I'll see if I can confirm that. Go ahead.
So you're observing the 25-foot setback all around the property, is that correct?
Yes.
And what are you proposing for entranceway, for access?
This portion of Townsend Road will be resurfaced and improved, and we're proposing a small cul-de-sac here that would be partially on this site and be a gravel access road around the perimeter of the site, not entirely around the perimeter site, but within the site, off of Townsend Road.
What does Townsend Road look like now?
It's passable, but it's not in the best shape. I understand there's a lot of trash and debris and could use some cleanup. So
The so-called landfill lot, that's filled with trash and debris, is it not?
yes, it is.
That's been used in various ways over the years. It was a town dump.
That's what I've learned. Yes.
Mr. Bowley also leased the property and had an operation where he discarded or used television sets and things like that. He dismantled them. A lot of that debris is also on the site.
That's part of the evidence we've found as well. Yes.
And the site is currently leaned by DEM for a substantial amount of money for what's there.
That I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
That would have been dealing with that. So.
Mr. Hoffman is dealing with that.
Okay.
But your access to the site from you have a cul-de-sac, you have a hammerhead to the, what direction would that?
North here,
Yes,
another one into the center of the site, and then a third one leg that would come down around along the southern edge of the site, which actually has 2 other turnarounds on that. So
and how many acres are you using, Mr. Osborne, for solar on the site?
let me check my notes here quick. The 2 lots that will have solar on them will be roughly 95 acres combined. Panels will cover approximately 50 acres of that, so just a little less than, or just a little more than 50% of the site will be covered with panels.
And that 50% includes the wetlands on site?
Well, there's no panels in the wetlands, so the wetlands would be part of the, roughly the remaining 50%.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you familiar with what your neighboring properties are there?
To some extent, not significantly.
Do you have a residence would that be to the northerly part of the site, Mr. Osborne?
That would be to the north, yes. I've got a little cheat sheet I put together here with some distances to some of the closest abutting residential buildings. It's a little over 1,000 feet to the nearest residence to the north.
That would be in this area.
Yes, correct.
How about to the west? That state of Rhode Island property?
To the east here?
Excuse me, to the
Oh,
east.
you're trying to test me.
Yeah, I get mixed up direction-wise.
State of Rhode Island, there are no residential structures on that. I can just kind of run on around them.
Yeah, if you would, please, yeah.
It's a little over 200 feet to this parcel on the east, southeast corner here from the arrays to the nearest structure. Between 280 and 300 feet from the arrays to any of the residential structures. Here, about 765, 870 feet in this direction. There's a residence here that's about 500, a little over 500 feet from the panels. A little over 400 feet from this structure to the closest panel. So.
And to the west, do you have any residences on this parcel to the west? That's a parcel that's zone commercial.
Commercial, yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the use of that structure.
Is there a structure on the property?
There is a structure.
Yeah.
South County Movement Center, it's a dance studio.
I think that might be located in a different direction. The movement center might be over here. Yeah, it's close. Yeah.
That site you're looking right there is a cellular tower site.
Thank you, sir. And also to the west on this, that's the Interstate 95.
To the north.
To the
Yeah, northwest corner of the site.
northwest. Yeah. Any residences along Route 95?
Not between the subject property and the right of way, no.
Okay. I don't have anything further of the witness. Anybody has any questions at this time?
We'll start with the council. Who wants to go first, and then I'll open it up to anyone in the audience that has questions for you about this witness.
You start if you want. What property is the closest with a home that has a residence? Are there any properties, 25 feet, 50 feet, their property lines to the panels or to
The property lines, I'm not sure I understand that.
Oh, I guess, yeah, I guess that wasn't a fair question. Homes, residences, what one is the closest, do you think?
I believe it's this residential structure. It's lot 57B, and it's, I'm sorry, that's 400 feet, yes. I think, actually, let me correct that. The closest structure would be this one back here, at 220 feet from the panels So
Is
that-
that
Wow.
lot 65?
Yes, it is.
And how many feet did you say?
220?
220. That was the only question I had at this time.
Any questions for Witness?
Are you the guy who talked about splitting up the lots?
Oh, that's somebody else.
No, you can ask me.
Okay, when you split the lots into four, the remaining parcels, how much land is left on those houses? I thought you said 1.8 something on one of them.
I believe one of them is 1.8 and the other one is a little over 2.
Okay, but 1.8, RFR 80 is 80,000 square feet, which is 2 acres. So you wouldn't be in compliance with the RFR
I think,
zoning.
not to split hairs, but I think that the RFR 80 is 80,000 square feet.
That's correct.
An acre is 43,000, so 2 acres is just a little bit less than or 80,000 square feet is a little bit less than 2 acres.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, the lot is designed to
I always thought the
comply
RFR
with.
80 was 2 acres.
Yeah, it's 80,000, yeah.
Just shy.
Yes.
Okay. As long as you're in compliance, everything is still, everything is left.
right, all lots will be conforming lots, that's great.
I just have a couple minor things, but I'll let them go. No, go ahead.
I have a question. The peninsula to the west, are you planning on using that? The reason-
No, I'm not using that.
Are you going to, when you fence around the property, are you going to fence that peninsula or just cut straight across?
I think we've got it designed to include the peninsula, but if you want it to come straight across, we're okay with that also.
Actually, the way it's designed now, if I can, is to, the fencing would come down this east line, along the edge of the wetlands here, and down the side, so this would be unfenced.
So that would basically go back to its forest and state. Okay. And then the access road, do you have any access from the opposite side, from the east? In case of an accident, an emergency, a broken leg, a heart attack, so that fire or ambulance can get through?
There is only one proposed access at this point in time. We have looked at the ability though, and grade-wise, I think an access road could be, emergency access could be brought in from that location if necessary.
So you will check with the fire department, the ambulance?
Yeah,
about that concern?
we have checked with the fire department, and they have no problem with the access way it is. The two means of access is nice, but is not required. They're more concerned is what is underneath the panels.
And the site fee, the lien on the landfill portion, who is responsible for that, even if you cover it?
I think there are probably other people on the team who can answer that question better than I can.
Okay, that's my question.
David?
I was provided quite a while ago with this preliminary, here, with some maps in here. And my map here that you provided to me doesn't seem to correspond to that map there, and I'm not really sure why that is, number one.
The short version is we've advanced the design a little bit in order to submit everything to DEM.
Okay.
So I think I probably have an exact copy of that, a reduced copy here, but this is slightly.
For example, I believe is that a gravel pit or something like that at the far right hand corner? Because that was included at one time, according to this map here.
Yeah, I think that's what Mr.
That's been reviewed. That's no longer involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me, because the Wood River is a huge aquifer under the Wood River right in this neck of the woods.
Yes.
Do you see that these wetlands as providing, sustaining the aquifer under the Wood River? I mean, does it naturally flow that direction, or does it flow a different direction so that we're not interrupting or cutting back on the aquifer of the Wood River?
We're not changing any of the watershed splits. There are, a portion of the site does drain to the west away from the Wood River here. The majority of it drains this direction, and we would honor those same watershed boundaries. Everything would continue the same direction.
That's the Wood River at the top right there, right?
Yes, right here.
Yep.
And I know that the design includes groundwater recharge as part of the DEM stormwater management criteria. So these, a number of these points that we have are infiltration points that will continue to feed that groundwater that feeds the Wood River. So.
Okay. Looking at this map here, not what it is, but anyhow, you may not be the person to tell me, but somebody's going to tell me, I'm sure. How many trees are you cutting down?
Oh, I don't know if I can count that. I'm just an engineer, but there's.
Is there somebody else that can tell me that?
Yeah.
We can tell you how many acres are.
Yeah, we can tell you exactly.
How many acres of trees?
Yes. Currently, there's about 5.5 acres that have been of the area proposed for panels has been cleared, and we've taken another 67 acres of clearing to put those panels in.
We'll have testimony as to how many trees are being taken.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I just had a quick question on that. Can you put that other map up, please?
The existing conditions or the subdivision?
Yeah, the conditions that it was. Yeah. I noticed that the site that where it's going to get cleaned up,
The landfill area?
landfill area, right? I noticed that encroached on the wetlands to some extent, right? It looks like it does. Maybe that other map, I forget which one, shows it a little bit more.
I think the.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
The property boundary line encroaches into the wetlands, but I don't know if there's no work proposed in the wetlands or the wetlands buffers.
Okay, so my question is, with that site, obviously you got to remediate the metals that are in that land and whatnot. How close to that wetland will the panels be, I guess? That's my question. In that particular parcel. Do you know the setback requirements on that?
We have the panel designer, maybe can testify to that. Directly.
Just from a quick look at this, I would say that it's on that parcel, it's at least 50 feet from the panels to the 50-foot wetland buffer. So it would be roughly 100 feet at least from the map at wetland edge to any of the proposed panels.
Okay, appreciate it.
I have one more
Yeah,
question.
sure.
You mentioned the soil erosion and sediment plan.
Yes.
We didn't get a copy of that. Can you provide a copy to the town tonight?
Tonight, I don't have a copy with me now.
Can you see to it that we get a copy
Sure.
of that as soon as possible, because it's helpful in making our decisions?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it? All right, so the council's finished with this. Does anybody in the audience have any particular questions of this particular witness? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium. State your name and question.
My name is Andrew McBride, and I live at 46 Old Depot Road, which on this map is Lot 3. And my question is, what's the setback off of Old Depot Road? Because I was told in what I read was it's 50 feet. And it might be 200 feet from my home because my home is 150 feet into my own property.
Yes, I don't have a scale in my pocket here, but based on the 25-foot buffer setback that's required, I would say that it's at least 50 feet from the panels to Old Depot Road and probably closer to 75 feet.
So that's roughly 125 to 150 feet out my front window, at least. So,
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, I live here, I'm one of the people that's involved. Why would we not want this in the town? Because it seems like there's so many other things that could be done with the property. One is the housing development, which I think none of the neighbors would really like to see there. There's other things that could be done with it too, and solar panels just seem to be very innocuous, good for the environment, something that's actually positive to be done with the land. And I'm just having a problem.
Yeah, well, we're just kind of beginning this whole hearing process. We have to obviously vet out all the questions and concerns and whatnot, and let the applicants explain the project. So on your more general question, I understand where you're coming from, but we'll get to that at some point during the hearing.
Okay.
But do you have any specific questions for this engineer?
Not at all. It was just a question that I heard the planning board kind of said no.
Yeah, okay.
Wondering why.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a different question. David Curran, I live at 50 Old Depot Road, I'm right on the corner here. This is my lot. I face this area. One of the things that I noticed, normally the way that the property is set right now with the trees in place and everything, I have highway noise. I knew that when I bought the home. It wasn't unobtrusive. This gentleman mentioned he's going to cut so many trees he can't count that high. Is anybody taking into account the decibel level is going to be, the increase in the decibel level for the homes that are on this? Because this plan, if I'm correct, is going to start in front of my home, and all this land that's now, I know there's some grazing land, all this land is going to end up being clear cut to Route 95. So I would venture to say, at any particular time during the day, the decibel level at my property from the highway traffic going by is going to increase enormously. The second thing is, he's talking, what was it, 25-foot setback, sir?
25-foot minimum setback per zone.
Per zoning, for the panels.
Correct.
Where is the fencing going to be on this piece of property?
It varies depending. Some places it's exactly along the property line. It's proposed here to be 25 feet.
So it's going to be 25 feet beyond that.
Correct.
Okay.
In that location, that's what's proposed.
Basically, I'm looking at solar panels for the home I spent a substantial amount of money for and paying a substantial amount of taxes for at this point. That's not the view that I moved to Hockley for. These tracts of land, whether they're homes or whatever, and I've got no problem with the Townsends and the other people taking this project to assist them in paying their property taxes on a regular basis. I know the town also collects money for each one of these panels put into place. But the quality of living, putting something like this, backing so close into a neighborhood that's on a dead-end street, that backs a management area, backs an aquifer, I'm going to lose a lot of money on my home. I have no problem with this project being cut back to about there, so that I don't have to look out my picture window in my yard and see a solar array, so that the next person I sell my home to when I retire doesn't have to look at a solar array. You have the opportunity now, okay, to stop this change, at least on portions of the property that are going to encroach on a neighborhood that has kids, that are going to have people living in there. These properties are all sold. The plat behind it is all sold. Nobody's going to be able to build here. The towns that want to build property here, great. More houses, there's more income, more stress on the schools. But right now, what they're looking for is a quiet development. Well, the quietness of this development disappears with the clear cut of all of the trees that they put up there. Has any engineering been done on the changes of what that's going to do for the decibel levels in the neighborhood?
I'm not so sure he's a sound person, but right
We have a sound.
We have a sound person. Yeah, so we'll get that question answered.
Okay. I'll wait to speak to him now.
Okay, all right, great.
But I'm opposed to this the way that it is set right now. I would not be opposed to amendments to cut this portion out of our neighborhood.
What lot are you on, sir?
I am on the corner, right here is the corner of the property where they've already cut a rough road into to be able to do some engineering studies, because we had their engineer there for a whole day. I'm in this piece of property right here. So it basically splits my lot.
Your name is?
David
Last name?
Curran, C-U-R-R-A-N. It's Assessors Plat 12, Lot 2.
Yeah.
I think it's what it is.
Yeah.
And those are the general concerns. I'm gonna sit here for the rest of the meeting and I'll,
Appreciate it, Mr.
questions come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, come to the podium, sir.
That brings up a couple of good questions.
Name and address, please.
Michael Church, 10 Grantville. Basically not opposed to solar at all. And I don't know the requirements as far as the visual impact off of roads. I know we've had quite a few in the area, the Reynolds Farm, there's a few that you can see from the road. Is there any requirement for a vegetative buffer?
There is.
So I mean, that, you know, some arborvitae's before you see the fence.
We're gonna get to the landscape person,
Okay.
so.
I mean, I know we require landscaping on commercial properties.
Yeah, but what I want to do is just kind of isolate our questions to the testimony that's just
Okay,
been given.
sorry.
It does, just helpful,
Yeah,
and then we'll
okay.
move on. How many witnesses do you have then?
9.
9. So we'll most likely get to your question. But if you have any questions for the engineer?
I'm not seeing that like on the Reynolds Farm,
Right.
the one on Bank Street.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, I don't know if that's something that
They're much
require
smaller.
or should require.
They're much smaller. Okay.
Mr. Hoffman? Name and address for the record, please, and your profession, Mr. Hoffman.
Robert Hoffman, professional engineer with 38 years' experience. I'm president of Hoffman Engineering since 1988. My address is 143 Cole Drive, North Kingstown, Rhode Island.
Mr. Hoffman, you have been engaged by the...
So then we're going to swear.
Oh, sorry.
To raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Did you answer the questions I asked you previously without being sworn in truthfully?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Hoffman, you have been engaged by the applicant concerning the so-called landfill lot.
No, that's correct.
Okay, could you tell us what the existing conditions are of that area which is depicted as it's approximately 12 acres?
Right, so the existing road goes by the 2 residential houses, and shortly after the second house's driveway, there's a cable with a stop sign on it, and there's very sporadic asphalt after that. At about that point, there's trash and debris on both sides of the road. Some of it just from illegal dumping over many years, a lot of tires. And as you get to the crest of the hill on the right is the former burn dump landfill, which is also then surrounded by all kinds of debris. Some of it dates back, the surface debris dates back to the landfill use, and then a lot of it is from when it was used as a scrap recovery yard.
Now, the area you've just described is Townsend Road, going up Townsend Road, right into the so-called, what's labeled landfill area.
Correct.
And did you mention the term of burned up?
Yeah, the material that's within the landfill itself was burned after it was deposited to reduce the space that the debris takes up, and also cuts down the long-term odors and also the rats and so forth.
You seen this document before, Mr. Hoffman?
Yes, I have. It's a lease for use of the landfill area.
And this is between the town of Hopkinton and the Townsends, George and Rose Townsend.
Correct.
And if I may, just before I introduce it into evidence, let me just read this paragraph. The lessee, who is the town, shall have the right to remove the earth and cut the trees and otherwise manage the demised premises for the purposes of conducting a public dump. It being understood that rubbish and materials dumped on the said premises shall not be removed by the lessor, but shall remain there until the termination of this lease. That was in 1960. Let me make that copy, please. So you have the town of Hopkinton leasing that property, or a portion of the property, as a town dump.
Correct.
Now, when you did your inspection of the property, did you find remnants of materials that could be described as part of a municipal dump?
Yeah, the material dates back certainly in that era, 60s, and then I believe further into the early 70s at least. There's general broken bottles, cans, and at that point in the early 70s they started putting the pull top aluminum tops, and the rest of the can was steel, so the rest of the cans rotted away. There's, you know, half-burnt toys and so forth, but it's very consistent with, I've worked on a lot of burn dumps, and it's very consistent with the type of material we find.
In addition, did you describe a burn dump and what that means?
Yeah, so again, we just, for those of you familiar with the Citizen Bank complex in Johnston, we just removed a 2-acre burn dump there. That had to go because the buildings were going right where the burn dump was at a very expensive cost. But essentially, after you burn the municipal debris, or in this case, it was just residential debris, from what we can tell. They just burn it, light it on fire. The one in my hometown in Maine, they used to burn once a week as long as it wasn't windy. And again, it takes care of the rats and reduces the volume probably by 80%.
So that, any doubt in your mind as an engineer that this was used as a burn dump?
No question. We did, so from our investigation, we did a number of test pits within the material and also did test pits to try to define the size of the landfill because parts of it were regraded and covered in order to flatten the land for use as a scrapyard. So the scrapyard's bigger than the footprint of the burn dump, but in a lot of cases they overlap each other.
Now, in addition to the dump that was used by the town, are there evidence of other materials on site?
Right, so it looks to me like before or maybe during or when the soil was taken out of it to accommodate the burn dump, because it definitely goes down a lot deeper than surrounding grade. As you go towards it would be the east, it looks like there's some asphalt and other material, and we surmise that it may have been when there's an old road that same road went across 95, either from that or from some other roadway construction. There's some asphalt intermixed with some big trap rock, and then in front of that is the burn dump, and then surrounding it on all sides and up the sides of the road, and anything from almost partial tractor trailer truck bodies would still have debris in them. A lot of transformer resistors and things, because I guess he scrapped a lot of wire from the Navy. So that material is just thrown about, and it's intermixed, and unfortunately there's trees and shrubs and stuff growing up, so it's going to be difficult to exhume that material. Some of it will be recycled off-site, other stuff will have to go as solid waste to central landfill.
Now, in what area is that, the materials that you just described, is that in this area, or is that in that area?
Right, so it's basically surrounding the entire landfill area, so it basically goes here. It's just at the edge of the wetlands. That was one of the questions before, but it's not in the wetlands. And then it literally goes all the way around. And then as you get up to the landfill, there was a main entrance, or there was a shortcut entrance that also has a lot of material there. And from what I understand, he had it set up, he made an earthen loading dock, if you will. So he mounted up so he could back a truck in there and unload stuff. And in that area there's material on both sides of that old ramp. So, but like I said, there's a lot of debris there. It's very difficult to estimate what it will take to get it all out.
Do you have any evidence of any materials, perhaps from the construction of Route 95 on the property?
Just that old roadway, like I say, Townsend Road, based on the aerials, used to go up and it may have gone across 95, or they had a section of pavement, there's a power line easement that goes through there. So there's definitely asphalt with actually has some painting striping on it still. But it's really old. It's the old Charvier asphalt.
And where is that located?
So that's on the back. So it'd be the east. It'd be the east-southeast portion beyond the landfill footprint.
So this site it's contaminated. Would you say it's contaminated? You've done testing wells?
So we did test pits. We tested 3 existing bedrock monitoring wells, and then we did 8 more borings. And yeah, it is contaminated, localized to the landfill. It's obviously got lead because and other metals, because all the painted material that was burned back then, they used metals, heavy metals, for the paint that was on them. So that material is in the landfill, in the soil directly beneath it. Fortunately, we don't find large groundwater impacts, which is great because there's no evidence that we had industrial dumping there from when it was a landfill. So that was our first and biggest fear. So as a result of testing not only on the site, we did test the 2 wells on the road leading up there, and those came out okay again for volatile organic compounds. So it's really the metals. So there's 2 issues with it. It's direct exposure and to the metals and all the surface debris. And what the DEM requires is that it be capped with an earthen cap to shed the water away from the top of the landfill.
So you have been in touch with Department of Environmental Management?
Right. We put together, which I see some of the findings, a site investigation report, and we had to come up with three recommended remedies, or 3 potential remedies. Dig it all out, truck it away, cap it, or do nothing. And the do nothing isn't acceptable under their rules and regulations. To dig it all out would be astronomically expensive, especially when a lot of places mixed in with trap rock. And then the best option is to cap it, monitor it, keep it mowed, and inspect it infinitum.
Were there existing wells on the property when you...
There were 3 6-inch diameter wells in the bedrock. I heard it was for potential development. I don't know exactly the history of them, but we purchased a special type of submersible pump those so we could get a representative sample of the water from those.
And did you sink any other wells on the property?
We put 8 monitoring wells. It's very difficult drilling because it's a mixture of cobbles, the overburdened landfill trash, and then bedrock in some cases. So yeah, we managed to get 8 wells, more monitoring wells in there at the request of the REDM.
You suggested to the council there's 3 ways of closing the landfill. One is prohibitively expensive, that's digging it all out. The other is to do nothing, which is not acceptable to DEM, but that they have liened the property.
Right.
And the third is capping. Could you describe what capping involves in this situation?
In this particular case, the first step would be to go around and gather all the surface material, whether it's from back when it was a landfill or back when it was used as a scrapyard. Segregate as much stuff as that can be recycled off-site. The rest of that stuff will have to go off as solid waste. The problem is with it, and I've done a lot of these too, you get a lot of broken glass and little pieces of stuff, shards and stuff that are too small to excavate, so you can't afford to excavate all kinds of soil with 10% little bit of debris, and to take that to central landfill at $90 a ton. So that material will then be put atop the existing burn dump area to be able to smooth it out in preparation of 2 feet of earth, 20 inches of it being common power gravel, sandy gravel, and 4 to 6 inches of loam, and then you hydroseed it, and you've got to maintain, I believe it's 2 or 3% minimum slope, so that the water sheds off. Then it needs to be mowed. The monitoring wells will have to be maintained and monitored over at least, based on every weather one I've done, probably 10 years, like maybe only 7, but probably 10. And then there's an annual inspection by an environmental professional forever that has to go to the DEM.
Now, all the work you have done to date is all been financed by the applicant.
Correct.
Now, what if the town of Hopkinton had to cap this area on its own? If the applicant quits right now and turns it over to the town, what is the town looking at?
So the cleanup, it's unclear on the fines, which still have to be resolved. Right now, the outstanding fines on the property is like $189,000. So if you include that in the number, and the estimate ends up coming out to about $720,000, which includes $750,000, but includes $30,000 that we've spent to date. So $720,000, and then on a job like this, what the EPA recommends is plus 50 minus 20. So the range of cleanup is our best estimate minus 20%, or our best estimate plus 50%. So that's the range. So on this, the range ended up coming out to like $602,000 to $1,128,000. And again, that includes the fine and the $34,000 spent to date. If you take that out, it's slightly less, but it's a considerable amount of money. But it's certainly cheaper than digging it all out.
Is that a list of the relative expenses?
Yes.
Can we make this part of the record? And when you said he, and you made a reference to electronic materials that are on site?
Correct.
Would you know who the individual was that was on the property, leasing the property from the Townsends? The other party who was confined? Paulay?
Paulay. And yeah, so my understanding, and so we met the DEM person in charge of compliance and inspection out there, and they pointed out areas they were concerned about oil, because some of the oil they had PCBs in it, so we had to make sure the oil had been cleaned up, because they came in and did a partial emergency response to get rid of some drums and containers. There was a tractor trailer truck full of like creosote that they actually had to get out. So that's where some of the funds come from, that recovering that cost. But then, so we checked those areas. But so what he did is, and you can still do it today, you can bid on a lot of stuff from the Navy. Like literally, it's a lot. They have a container full of junk, and you bid on it, and the high bidder or whatever gets the lot, and then they get to salvage it. And then they take this stuff, and I've seen this on another site up on Blueberry Heights or whatever, over in West Greenwich. They just take all the good stuff and leave all the stuff, and other bad stuff in the woods. So that's kind of what happened here. When I first saw this site, I was very, very concerned about PCBs, because there are transformer resistors all over the place. But fortunately, most of those were the resistors that don't have a transformer. They just have copper in the middle of them, from what we understand from DEM.
Now, Mr. Bowley, on the land records, he has been fined by DEM.
Yes, and there's numerous, it goes back and forth for years.
And he is now deceased, is that correct?
Right, I think, yeah, there's a whole bunch of deceased people in the record. The attorney died and then he died, and yeah. It's been very difficult to get the record straight with DEM.
Now, your work on the site was limited to the landfill area?
We walked the rest of the site as part of a standard phase 1 environmental assessment, just to make sure there weren't other areas of dumping or debris and so forth. So the rest of the, I mean, it's just a lot of blown down trees and you know, just a difficult site to walk, a lot of boulders. But yeah, we didn't find anything else other than the landfill and the debris area.
Is it your understanding that if this project is approved, the applicant will bear the burden of remediating the site?
That's correct. We're actually working on the remedial action work plan.
I don't have any further questions, Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was talking to Tom, did you also?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. All right, who wants to start for Mr. Hoffman? Robert?
So at this point, who is the final person that owes the $190,000?
It is.
Is it the property? Is it a lien on the property?
They usually put a lien on the owner operator, so it's, I don't know if the attorney can speak, you can speak to that.
It is the Townsend family and Mr. Bewley, Mr. Bewley, however you pronounce his name.
Townsend family and Mr. Can you spell his last
I
name?
think it's B-E-W-L-A-Y.
So those are the people that owe the money. And then I have a question. The land, when you're going to be capping it, you are planning on capping it all the way to the scrap edge, not just to the main landfill, is my understanding?
No, we're gonna stay, that's why we did the test pits around. We're gonna go across the burn dump area itself. The scrap material will be exhumed, if you will, gotten rid of, and all the other debris material. And then any of the small shards and stuff will be put atop the landfill, graded, and then, so the landfill footprint itself will end up being a much smaller area than what you go up there and see what would be a landfill now.
So it will actually be the cover of the landfill, not the scrap edge,
Right.
but you are going to clean up the scrap edge.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
David?
So you, am I correct in thinking that you said that the remedial action to correct the situation by covering it is going to cost something between $750,000, a little over $1 million, is that correct?
Including the fine. If you take the fine out of it, it's
A little less.
600, yeah.
No, is that going to be paid for by the applicant? Somebody's paying for that, that's right. Am I correct?
If the project is approved, the applicant has made arrangements
Okay.
to remediate.
So the state will continue to have a lien on the property,
Correct.
and that'll have no effect on the project itself?
No. Once the remediation takes place, the landfill area will be used for solar panels.
Right, and the lien or the penalty amount would be on the owners of the property, but not on the people that want to put the solar panels in.
There's an arrangement that's been made for payment of the fine out of the sale of the property.
Okay. About 30 years ago, there was a fire up there, because I was on the Hope Valley Wyoming Fire Department at that time, volunteer. We went up there, and there was a section of a plane up there. There was also, as you go up the road towards 95, on the left-hand side, there were what I would call transformers that come off telephone poles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, lined up all along the side there, and those contain PCBs, I understand, is that correct?
Right.
Are those still there?
No, those were removed as part of that, and I think I read your report, and John Neal came down and they came in and did emergency response and got rid of all the free oil liquids, whether they be in a transformer, this tanker truck I described, and they had to get drums lined up.
Yeah.
So the DEM got rid of those, and then what our Our biggest concern was, well, where those things sat, was there oil left under there? That's why that was our first set of test pits. And we wouldn't have had a clue, frankly, from the little sketchy reports.
Right.
You know, he actually went and pointed out, the guy was really good from DEM, and so we went and did test pits there, and they did a good job cleaning up the DEM when they did that section, but the rest of the stuff wasn't an imminent threat like an oil would be.
The reason why I said that is I'm wondering if any of those things, those transformers are any barrels of oil or barrels of noxious liquids were buried up there, and of course you're driving pylons and stanchions down into the earth, probably down to 8 feet deep at a pretty regular basis. I'm just a little concerned that you drive one of these posts down into the ground, these steel posts, and you're going to hit some stuff you don't want to hit. Is that possible, or do you think you cover yourself with the wells that are there?
Yeah, I think we're well covered with the wells, just based on the age of the material that was there. I mean, we didn't find any. I think we found a couple of parts per billion of tetrachloroethylene, which is unbelievable. I mean, that's the biggest fear on this, and a little bit of toluene, which is a oil gasoline. That's no. And the other thing that I think is going to be real important, but I appreciate your comment. When we do essentially it's going to be almost like a test pit to clean that debris up. We want to make sure that it's not just going to be, we're going to tell Joe to start digging and we'll come back when he's done for the day.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that there's not stuff buried beneath the areas that they're digging. So it looks like, I don't know how to say it nicely, God rest his soul, but he was too lazy to bury stuff. He would just dump it someplace else, you know. I mean, there's no. But anyway.
The town leased the land. My correct? Assuming this, the town leased the land.
Yes.
Townsend. How long was that lease for? When did it end?
It started in 1960 and it was for 5 years. And we think it probably went on longer than that, was before the town transferred its landfill over to Canatra Road.
Okay, and so can I assume that there's no liability on the town's part regarding that landfill anymore?
I believe if the applicant walked away, the DEM, the Townsend have no ability to pay the land. Bowley's dead.
Yeah.
His estate is zero, and I would think that somewhere in the chain that the town would have the responsibility.
It would go back to owner operators, so the town as an operator would be liable for.
Really?
Yeah.
Go back to 50 years, over 50 years?
Oh, they'll go back, believe me. I work on a lot of coal gasification sites, go back to insurance policies from the 1800s.
How long has that lien been on the property from the state? Ballpark.
Give me a second and I'll...
Well, the reason why I ask that is because if the state, if it's been 25 years and the state hasn't come after the town to this point, what makes me think, or what would make anybody think that it's going to come after us? Us, the town.
I can answer that. There was always a rumor that this was a town landfill, but they never knew for sure.
Yeah.
Until we did the test pits. And then, because it's not like, because Valley, when he was surfacing it, some of this is already covered, it's not covered properly, but he just pushed dirt around, so it's not like you walk up and go, wow, look at all these burnt bottles and cans and stuff. But now that you have a lease and they got a record of it, they will definitely, certainly be looking for you.
So there's actually a paper, a lease that says, we the town want to...
Yeah, I just...
Oh, okay, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, good, yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
We know that you use pylons to anchor these things, but when it comes to landfills, you don't do that. It's
Well,
different. So how, is it going to be different here?
No, so I'm working on...
And just the landfill site?
Right, on just the landfill cap site, if you cap with 2 feet of soil, which like I say, it'd probably be 3 because there's probably a foot there, but even without that, the nice thing about this is such an old burn dump that there's no methane issue. So on North Providence landfill, they had to use a ballasted system, which is, for lack of a better term, big concrete blocks. Whereas on 8th Street landfill up near Central Landfill, we're working on 2 landfills there. Same thing, it's an earthen cap, and they're driving the piles. So you can drive the piles as long as there's no methane, because it doesn't affect the cap. So, I mean, so that's the nice thing about this landfill. There's no methane issue or hydrogen sulfide issue.
Okay, now you have a question.
You said that there are 3 wells existing on the property, and you added 8 more.
Right.
11 total.
Right.
How deep are the wells?
All right, so I think the deepest, maybe off a little bit, but the deepest bedrock wells, those existing ones, I think one of them was 170 feet, and then there was one 110. I mean, they were very deep. That's why we had to, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen engineers go out and drill wells, but you don't drill wells 170 feet. So we got a submersible pump dedicated, ran it for an entire day on each well to be able to get the samples out of them. Then the wells we put in ranged down to like 20, 25 feet. Again, in some cases, we hit bedrock at 3 feet. So we had the air rotary down to 20 feet to be able to get the water yield. And that's one thing about the groundwater on this site is, you know, we put some wells right in the landfill to get the water quality beneath the landfill. Then we surrounded it all the way around, only because it's not like a typical easy site where you have overburden and the groundwater definitely goes that way. Here it goes somewhat radially based on the bedrock. So the only way you could ever really get groundwater, I think, if you had a drought for 6 months and never rained, you go out there and figure out the wells, and then you might be able to figure out exactly how the groundwater flows with in the bedrock. But that's why we put so many wells around it and a couple in it. But it's a pretty, like I say, the nice thing is it wasn't an industrial dump. I mean, the one that did on Citizens Bank, that they took drums of stuff there too.
All right, so you answered my second question, which was where were the wells? So it's in the perimeter.
Yeah, we went all the way around the landfill, and then 2 or 3, you can make it, yeah, probably 3 in the landfill and 5 more around it.
Thank you.
And I'm also, I appreciate your, so hang on, just in case anyone out in the audience wishes to. My friend Harvey, come up to speak us and ask Mr. Hoffman any questions.
Mr. Hoffman, would you say this dump was sort of typical small town dump of the era?
Oh, yeah, especially given the relative lack of industry. I mean, and I know I've worked on other dumps down here. I mean, and I don't want to name names as far as some of your industries go, but a lot of those industries had their own little dumps. So they didn't take it to this municipal dump from anything we see. It was basically just residential.
So would you say there's a good chance that this is not the only small dump in the town?
Oh, no, there's numerous other dumps. I mean, I've been working on a cleanup in Tiverton for 85 homes, and during that, we found 3 more small dumps. But when I tell you small dumps, they'll be as small as this area here, where I walk my dogs every day. At each end of every dead-end road, there's a little dump. So there's little dumps all over the place. This was a little more than just a little dump, but not as big as a big dump.
And how long has typically towns and small towns had dumps?
Well, what we look for when we do environmental assessments, every farm has a dump. So every farm has a dump. And then probably most in the 60s, right around the 60s, they started municipal, because the lots got smaller, you can't throw your dump because then it's in someone else's backyard, and they started making municipal dumps, if you will. That's pretty typical. Most of them go back to the 60s. And then they went right up to, I mean, in Exeter, I know what 5 little dumps are. They went up until they started bigger dumps in the 80s or whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Harvey. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, or no? Good point.
Paul Julio, I just had a quick question. So the lien and everything you're saying to DM, does that mean that they did not comply with the DM judgment in 2005, that they clean everything up within 180 days?
Right, and that sounds about right, the dates. What happened was, they had a consent agreement that they signed, and then they didn't do it. They went for enforcement action. They actually had a hearing, they had a hearing officer, what's your point, DEM, nobody showed up, like zero. So that's the kind of stuff, and there's just this long paper trail. But yeah,
Just to know that the compliance wasn't done in 2005.
yeah, about that time, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Hoffman from the audience? Folks? Okay, wait for a second.
I don't know if you'd be the person to ask, but maybe you can help me out with this. The council, the town has not wanted blasting done on any of these sites. Would you be the person to talk about that? We don't want any blasting done.
Right, well,
Do you
from our
anticipate,
stand,
think we're going to do it?
from our standpoint, our remedial work won't require any blasting. And we will be using, when we pick up the debris, some of it's in between big rocks, we will be using a claw on an excavator. But from our standpoint, we won't have to blast, but the rest of the people will have to speak to that. But just so you know, and a little bit that I know, I've worked on some other sites with lights that they put solar panels on. They actually just take and they pour the rock and put the post right in the rock. So they don't have to blast, but. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, Mr. Bailey. Okay, then, next time.
Tremendous revenue.
Thank you. 2 out of 2 isn't bad. I'm going to call it the landscaper, because I know there are people interested in the landscape. I don't want it to go too late. It's kind of out of time.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Gentlemen, state your name and age. We'll throw that in too.
My name is Kevin Alverson. I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Rhode Island. I'm the owner and principal of Kevin Alverson Landscape Architecture in Wickford, Rhode Island.
And how long have you been licensed in Rhode Island?
13 years.
I wanted to take you out of time because I know there's some people in the audience that are interested in the landscaping here. Could you tell the council and members of the public what you're planning by way of landscaping on site?
Sure. So I was tasked with reviewing the site for aesthetic and buffering impacts on the surrounding communities. That's including the passerbys on the roadways as well as the adjacent residences for the site. So I reviewed the existing vegetated condition out there back in mid-May, did a few different site visits, actually walked the property. Got a general characteristic of the forest. We actually have a forester that submitted a report as part of, under a different expert witness testimony. But generally found that the woods were highly managed over the years. Moderately mature, but probably last 40 years or so. Trees are generally about 40 to 60 feet in height. Fairly thin on the interior, other than a lot of down branches and scrub brushes. But there is some more substantial vegetation along the northern property line, abutting the highway. Along the western edge, there's actually some more mature shrub vegetation. The southeast corner of the lot, however, the forest was in fairly poor condition due to probably insect damage, wind, blowing damage, steep to the block.
Could you point that out, Kevin, please?
That's very good question. As a matter of assessing the visual impact, my task is to make this site, whether through existing vegetation, maintained supplementary vegetation, to obscure all components of the facility from the abutting landowners, the abutting roadways. so I can take a quick walk through.
Yeah, if you would, please.
So the focus areas, so if you can hear me. I'll just start at the northern edge, along Interstate 95. There's actually a fairly substantial buffer that exists there currently. There's also about on average, 8 to 10 foot grade change, meaning the highway is about 8 to 10 feet below where any of the solar panels would be. I did do a study for a cross section here. You can see this top cross section is cut right through at probably the most visual point in the arc of the highway. You can see here are the cars. The red line depicts the sight lines from a standard sort of mid-sized SUV size car. I also did include the scale, personal scale through here. So you can see that the grade lines or the view lines actually don't even cross the hill. But as part of that, the highway is 40 feet from the edge of the existing vegetation. We are maintaining a 25-foot minimum vegetative buffer along the entire perimeter of the site. And from my measurements out there, there's actually going to be, from the property line out to the cleared line, which is kind of a ledge cut, there's going to be an additional 75 feet. So we're looking at about 100 feet of vegetative buffering that's going to be maintained along that northern portion of the site. Then the panels are about 40 feet in from that point, so we're about 140 feet from, it's actually it's 160 feet from the edge of the road to the nearest panel.
Will you, driving north on 95, will you see the panels on site?
No.
Okay. And like you say, the highway, Route 95, is lower than the site?
That's correct.
Okay.
For the portion of for the portion of the site that abuts the highway, the panels are higher than the road surface. However, the other main points that we wanted to focus on, certainly on the eastern portion of the site where the wetlands came up and above, we are just maintaining the existing 25-foot vegetated buffer. This is all unimproved land owned by the state. This is actually a cattle farm that's over here on the corner to the northeast of the site. This peninsula is being untouched by the project itself. So then the hot areas that we want, and along the southern edge of the site, the vast majority of it is unimproved residential property, so just forested lands. There is an existing building that's about 870 feet from the nearest panel in that one area through the woods. Along the western edge at Townsend Road, where our main entrance is going to be, is one of the areas that, because the topography and the vegetation, we felt didn't sufficiently buffer this site. My hands are sticking. We are proposing, so here's the property line here. 25 feet of maintained, minimum 25 feet. In these areas, about 50 feet of maintained vegetation to the edge of the roadway. We're actually adding an additional 40 feet or so of buffering, mixed vegetation of evergreen trees, deciduous flowering understory trees, mixture of evergreen and deciduous shrubs to provide some biodiversity out here. One concern as I was reviewing the forest is that the current condition of the understory is very limited. It's very monoculture. It's great blueberries through there. That's about it. There's mountain laurel and blueberry. So we'd like to be able to bring in some other things that, as part of the supplemental buffer, that will give a little bit more habitat, food, cover for the critters on the site. And then the main area that we wanted to focus the majority of our plantings, because of the poor character and openness of the forest in that southeast corner, and certainly because it's abutting private residential use, is this area through here. So we really want to increase the buffer from what it is currently. I also did a cross-section view of that area to ensure that we're buffering sufficiently. What I chose was the houses that's closest to the panels in that area. So that's actually...
which would be where?
This is lot 2. In that one area, there is some infiltration ponds and things, so that's just for reference, that's at the southeast corner of the site. So lot 2, I ran a cross-section through the house and to the panels. And so as stated before by Mr. Osgood, that house is about 290 feet from the closest panel. However, just for vegetative purposes, from the edge of the road to the property line is about 35 feet of woods that will remain. Where it's thin through there, we're proposing to add some additional understory vegetation in that area on the property line side of it. The fence line will be pushed to the 25 feet beyond the property line. So from the edge of the road, the vegetative buffer that's maintained is actually going to be about 60 feet in that area. And then on the back side of that 25 feet, we actually worked with the solar engineers, the solar designers, and the civil engineers to move the panels further into the site in that location. So we're actually going to be adding another 20, it's actually 20 to 40 additional feet of buffering on that side of it. So if you can picture, existing trees will be maintained, fence line will be on the inside of the existing trees. We're going to have shrubs on the back side of the fence as well. We're also proposing black chain link fence in that area to make the fence actually less visible from the roadways.
And what type of planting are you bringing in there? Are you proposing to? That's along Old Depot Road?
That's right, along Old Depot Road. So it's a mixture of several different things. Again, for biodiversity, but also for to make it so it doesn't look like a green wall. We have white pine, American holly, white spruce where appropriate for sun, also some cedars possibly on the edge of the woods, which is where they would naturally grow. Some swamp white cedars, which is a type of arborvitae. And then we're also proposing some understory trees, so we'll go to dogwood, eastern fringe tree, eastern redbud, mixture of shrubs, everything from inkberry to native rhododendron to winterberry, several different types of viburnum.
When you say understory, what do you mean by understory?
Understory would be, you know, the forest kind of has a progression to it. So you have your large trees, and you have your understory trees, which are the smaller trees and larger shrubs that sit in that plane. And then as you get towards the edge of the woods is where you typically have some of the smaller vegetation. And then there's what they call the duff layer, which is the ground covers, the sticks, the little blueberry that grows on the ground.
So with the existing wood, what term do I want here? With the existing vegetation along, okay.
And then we're supplementing the vegetation on the inside. So back to the cross section. This is the block of existing vegetation. This is the block of proposed vegetation behind that.
I see. Now, do the actually touch Old Depot Road?
No, the panels are actually set in from there. Again, back to this front. We have from Old Depot Road, this is 60, 80 feet plus that, so it's about 160 feet from Old Depot Road is where the panels would be.
Okay.
That's at its closest point.
All right. And the houses that abut Old Depot Road, is that the front of the houses?
That's the front of the house based on the survey that we have, and the current layout of the solar array. So lot 2, we're 290 feet from the front facade of the building to the closest solar panel. From lot 65, we're 220 feet from the, I guess would be the western facade of the building to the first solar panel. From lot 3, we're 305 feet from the front facade to the first solar panel. And lot 4, 270, and lot 5, which is the first, you keep going down the street that way, we're about 340 feet.
And you've got how many feet of vegetation there before your panels start?
It varies somewhat, but it's about 60 plus 2, so we'll say anywhere from 80 to 100 feet. It's 25, yeah, so 60, 80, and on some areas up to 4, so it's 180 to 120 feet.
Could you go back to that panel again? How about for the gentleman there that spoke, Mr. Curran? Is that Mr. Curran's property on lot 2?
Yes.
And what are you doing on the corner? That is the corner of our property.
That's the corner of our property, so at its narrowest point, it's about 85 feet of buffering, and at the southeast corner, we have a little bit more room. It's actually closer to, we'll call it 90 feet.
And how far is Mr. Curran's home from the property line?
From the property line?
Yeah, if that's an easy one.
It's, if this is 300, it's probably 150 feet, maybe at its closest point, 120, 150 feet to the property line.
Is that to his property line or our property line?
That's from his house to our property line.
Okay. And how about from his house to the panels?
290 feet.
Okay. Any other areas?
So there is area that's grass in between.
Okay. And the residence on lot 65, what is the distance of that residence from the panels?
From the panels, it's 220 feet, we'll call it. And from the property line, it's, I'd say it's about 140 feet or so from that property line.
How about on other areas on the site? What are you proposing? Any areas that you have not talked about?
No. Along the, just for the overview again, along the vast majority of the southern portion of the site, we're just maintaining the existing 25-foot vegetative buffer because there is 800, it's about 1,000 feet from the road edge to the nearest panel.
Now that's a rather large piece of residential property, but only has one house on it right now.
That's, yes. I'm not sure if it's a house or if it's a structure on there.
Oh,
but
okay.
It did show up. It's kind of deep in the woods there.
Okay. And you're maintaining the existing vegetation, and you're adding vegetation along that property line as well?
So currently, we're not specifying additional vegetation, but what we have agreed to, and I made note at the planning board as well, is that the developer, should this go forward, would certainly work with abutters as well, that if there's supplemental buffering at the end of the day where we feel it really needs to be even increased more, then we can work with them to do that. So, for example, if they decided that they want to clear or make a big backyard over there, I'm sure that we could communicate with them to
And that's something that the applicant is amenable to?
That's correct.
Anything else, Kevin, landscaping-wise?
Okay, all right, who wants to start?
Let's start. What are the type of trees primarily, what are the type of trees that are on the property?
Currently on the site?
Currently on the site.
There's a lot of white pine. There's also a lot of maples and a lot of oaks, but the maples and oaks are not fairly substantial in size. There's a lot of scrub pine that's in there, so like it's evidence of there's been ongoing logging. So the bigger trees have been taken out, smaller trees start to come up in certain areas.
Has a study been done to make sure there's is or isn't any protected species there? I'm thinking of things such as a princess pine, for example.
Yeah, so we have another environmental engineer that will be able to speak to that more, but this site, as far as I understand, has not been identified as a site that houses rare and endangered species.
Has anybody walked the site to make sure, because we have quite a bit of it, Native American historic sites on the property?
I couldn't speak to that.
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay, yeah. And you might be the person to tell me, how many trees are going to be cut?
So we're looking at like 7,200 to 7,500, I believe, is what the count was based on what we had seen out there. The forester had also done an assessment. I want to say it was 150 trees per acre.
Yeah.
And so the math works out to about 72 to 7,500 square feet. Again, our environmental engineer will be able to speak to that for a study.
I'll check with him also. Okay, good, I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
So my understanding is the buffer is going to be on both the outside and the inside of the black fence line.
Yes, it'll sort of weave in some areas. I'm sure that we won't be able to get something right in front of it in certain areas, but
But
yes.
you're certainly going to buffer both sides, so they don't have to look at a fence line,
That's
a
right.
chain link fence line.
And it will be, the fence line will be placed on the inside of the vegetative buffer that's being maintained as well, so it's not.
And then another question, on the wetlands area, as they're clearing for the solar array, do you, or does the environmental person, or does DEM have any say about how, not only how close do you get, but if you have taken too much away from the wetlands and you have to replant some of the wetland areas?
We are staying outside of any of their regulated areas, so we're staying out of the wetlands proper, the 50-foot perimeter wetland where it's abutting
So
a
you
swamp,
did 50 foot?
and 100-foot off of the wetland where it's a stream,
Okay, thank you.
or up to 200, I think, if the stream's wide enough, but
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the ancillary
yes,
area.
that'll be maintained as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one specific question. Is there any specific vegetation, trees or whatever, to limit the highway noise? Or what tree would be best suited?
So buffering is best done with layers. So to answer your point, certainly adjacent to the residences in this area, the buffer that we're proposing is going to be a dense, opaque evergreen buffer of mixed trees, of mixed evergreen trees, plus with some additional canopy trees that'll be in there as well, and shrub vegetation. Our sound engineer can speak more towards the actual decibel counts for that, but in my experience with buffer plantings, buffering is always best done in layers.
I can understand that, it's like trying to keep warm.
Right.
You spoke of 7,200 trees that roughly being cut. What is the smallest diameter that you consider a tree?
Like anything above 5 inches, 5 to 6 inches or so.
At 4 feet high or?
Yeah, that breast height, yeah. So saplings and things are not included in that.
That's it? Yes. Okay.
Along that edge, lot 2, 3, 4, that you were specifically talking about.
This area.
Yeah, how high are the trees now? in that area?
Currently?
How high are they now?
They range, the largest one's probably about 50 to 60 feet probably tall. Maybe some are higher than that, but on average, I would say the canopy of the forest is between 40 and 60. That's what I calculated myself.
Will those trees of that height be able to be left there? You moved your panels another 25 feet in. Are those trees that are tall going to be cut down, or are you going to leave them there?
Not the ones within the 25 foot that we're maintaining at the property line. All of those will remain. So
I'll tell you what I want to know. I want to know that you're going to leave trees of a certain height along there. I want to know what you're going to leave and how high they are. Because we don't want those properties to be able to see those panels. So I want to know if you're going to cut down those tall trees, or you're going to leave them there and they don't interfere with the panels.
within the solar array, in the specified clear areas, all vegetation will be removed.
Of course.
Within the 25-foot buffer, nothing will be removed, other
So-
than dead trees.
Within the 25-foot buffer that is there now, how tall are those trees?
They're about the same height. It's pretty
They're-
consistent.
Of 40 feet?
Yeah, there's really
40
no.
to 60?
Yes, there's really no understory in there. There's a lot of broken branches, a lot of fallen trees and things, but there's not a lot of like shrub vegetation in that area. That's why as part of maintaining all the larger trees and vegetation, we want to bring in some additional plants all on the inside of that, so that it'll take, again, from the sight line, this is from lot 3, at first floor level, sight line through here, you can see it's going through some of the canopy of the existing trees that will be going through here, but it's very thin, so we'll be installing plantings on the inside of that as well. Evergreen vegetation, that will, and these will be trees that will grow up to at least that same height.
So if I'm on the first floor of those lots on their home, 2, 3, 4, if I'm on their first floor or on their back deck and I look out, I don't want to see the panels, correct?
That's correct. That was the standard.
That's your guarantee?
That's
your guarantee?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, when the plants are installed, we'll be sure to put in larger trees in key specific locations. but it's really difficult to find like, 100, 20-foot tall trees. So there will be some time, I'm sure, that along those areas that the trees will be growing up. But the species that we have chosen grow anywhere from 12 to 18 inches a year. We've actually already increased the tree size for what we're specifying. So we can focus some of our larger trees as well in some key locations.
Frank, can I follow up on that? Do you disagree or agree that at some point you don't want those trees to be too tall because they're going to cast a shadow on the panels? Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's right. So there is going to be a limit to the height of the trees in the buffer zone, I would think. Because the buffer zone, as I see it right now, is 25 feet away from the panels.
It's actually not. The buffer zone is, the panels themselves on average, here, that's 25 feet.
Yeah.
The panels are another almost 100 feet from that area.
Okay.
So we've worked with the solar designers to look at trees and casting a shadow. As we get further into the design, they'll be doing an actual shadow assessment on all of those trees through there. So
I'd like to think that if there's going to be a problem with the height of the trees in the green areas that are shown here, that instead of cutting those trees down the buffer zone, because you could, because they're on your property or on the property, that the panels will be moved back slightly or enough so that those large trees are not going to be cut down, but the panels are going to be pushed back to the point that there's no shadow cast on those panels. I'd like to see the panels pushed back rather than the trees cut down, that's what I'm saying.
sure, I understand that.
Okay.
I can't speak to that, but I know what's going to happen.
You can't give me that assurance. Okay.
We would stipulate to that.
Yeah.
Those trees.
Because I'm sure there's some very nice oaks in there, possibly some maples that could cause a problem with the panels. And I'd rather see those trees stay, and the panels just move back another 25 feet.
Those trees.
Thank you.
Great.
Have fun.
Okay. Mr. Allen, just a quick question regarding the residents that live on that side that we were spending a lot of time on. So I guess, and then their applicant, you got to make sure that if in fact this does go forward, and I'm not saying it is, we just have to figure this all out, but make sure that they're happy and you do whatever you can within your power to make sure that they're not seeing what they don't want to see and seeing what they do want to see. So that's my ask. Yeah.
I just have a simple question. Which direction do solar panels face? My understanding is it should be south.
Yes.
What is south?
My home, that is south.
Exactly, his home is south. So all of the panels are basically facing Old Depot Road.
That's correct.
Just clarifying that.
Yes, generally, they're slightly skewed from that.
Yeah, we're not getting the profile, we're getting full-on solar photoelectric panel. Thank you very much.
Okay. Council all done with their questions now. The public, Mr. McBride, you can come to the podium.
I have a question, the layout is very
They come to the
intricate.
mic, because it's hard for people at home to hear the video later.
The landscape architecture layout is very intricate, but my question would be, and I think it's a valid question, how are you able to cut down trees and then replant trees that are going to be mature enough to block the view of these solar panels from these residents' house? We all know that these landscape designers come in and say, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and no offense to you and your profession. You know, I use Stop and Shop as an example in Richmond, where they came in, they said they're going to plant these beautiful dogwood trees, and that was, 2006, 2007, and they're about 12 feet tall right now. So these trees take years to mature. I know because when I first moved into my house 22 years ago, we bought a live Christmas tree, a white spruce, and I planted it in my front yard. It's about 14 feet, 16 feet tall right now, and that's 22 years of growing. So my fear, and this is where I stand with Dave, is that you're not going to be able to plant enough things to cover these panels from the view from our homes. And my proposal would be to make the setback, give me the same setback as the wetlands. Give me 200 feet, not the 50 feet that they're looking to do off of my yard. So that's my request.
Okay, thanks, Mr. McBride. Mr. Kirk?
I know that you mentioned some figures, you can enter the one figure, bounce around and give you a presentation. What was it you said from my house to the first corner of the panel? What was the distance?
290.
290 feet. Okay. So 290 feet, and that was from my home, not from my property line, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, from the edge of my home to the property line.
Hey, Mr. Kerr?
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. From the edge of my home to the property line is roughly 1 to the side of the road on my side.
Roughly 130, 150 feet, something like that.
So 240, 130, talking about 100 feet from my property line is going to be the first panel.
150.
Okay. You're a landscape architect. Are you going to be able to guarantee me that you would put this project a couple 100 feet in front of your house and be able to buffer it properly so that you and your family and your guests don't look out and see a sea of blue panels looking back at you? Yes or no?
With the buffering that we're proposing, yeah, I would be okay with it.
Well, you must have fast growing trees. Or you people are going to spend an exorbitant amount of money to put in mature plants over there. My next question is, you've been through that property you've seen from Old Depot looking in?
Yes.
It was logged recently. When I moved in, that was all woods. You know, what you have to do is good forestry. You log, take plants out so other plants can mature and grow. There isn't much of a buffer there now from where you stand with the corner of your first panel in front of my house. That's going to all be filled in for 100 feet?
Yes.
Okay, so the 40 is...
Well, our new buffer that we're proposing
Yeah.
is anywhere a minimum of 20 feet additional to it, to up to 40 to 50 feet in some areas. And where we can, we're going to be trying to plant additional shrub vegetation in the clear understory that we were talking about.
Which is going to grow to a height of?
The shrubs will probably grow to a height of, depending on the shrubs, up to 12 to 25 feet. The trees themselves will be at full growth. They'll be up to 60, 70 feet, but we'll be focusing our larger vegetation just for this reason. We want to be able to have the areas that are most important for buffering adjacent to your neighborhood.
Okay.
We want to have those trees.
And you were in my neighborhood?
I was.
Did you take a measurement from the front of my house to where your plant panels are, and that's where you came up with these figures?
Well, the design was finalized after my site visit, so what we did is simply survey and of your property, and then we applied the numbers.
At about 10 feet off the ground?
At about 10 feet off the ground.
Okay, so this is the buffering and I'm going to get. My second question is, you've seen most of the trees that are in that area, we have lichen that grows on them. Who's going to maintain this buffer to make sure if the trees start dying off, who do I call? Who comes out and makes sure that an arborist comes down, trims these trees properly, and takes care and maintains this buffer that you have?
That's something that I think we can address through the owner of the site, but what, you know, it's a condition of the approval that we had
Right, well,
maintained.
I know it's condition of approval, I have it on record now. I have it on record saying that.
It can be a condition, it hasn't been one, but that's something that we can talk about.
Okay, and to answer the question about species of plants that may be endangered or protected in that area where we are, I have 2 recurring lady slippers that come in every year. So I'm sure those aren't the only 2 in the neighborhood. That might be something that the DEM might want to know.
Could you tell us what color the lady slippers are?
They're pink, and they're gorgeous.
Oh, I know.
They are. I wish I had pictures of them.
They're in there. Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Harvey?
I'm just trying to be sure I understand. I couldn't see these diagrams from where I'm sitting. on the solar panel side of the buffers,
Yes.
I mean, the sun's coming in, depending on whether it's coming from the east or south or west or whatever, it's coming in at a slant. So the tallest trees that are 60, 70 foot or taller that are going to grow there, apparently they're not going to shade the panels very much at the times of day that can generate some considerable electricity.
That's what we've been working with the solar designer to confirm all of our solar calculations for shading.
So,
It doesn't make sense to put panels.
so we've got those tall trees. Between the tall trees and to where you get down to where the grass area is there some type of system to step down the forest?
That's correct. That's what I was trying to refer to before as far as the layering effect. So you have
Layering shorter and shorter as it
trees.
approaches those
Exactly,
panels?
exactly. So as it approaches the panels, so that trees naturally when they get older, some trees, white pine in particular, lose some of their lower branches. But their lower branches, they get thinner. So the idea is to create a layered forest so that that's not going to be an issue.
And that area, are there going to be species of trees and things there that need to be like underneath the power lines and stuff where you cut it and you make sort of a brushy habitat that's actually a visible habitat?
The solar designer can speak to that more, but the only power that's going to be overhead is at the access off the Townsend Road where it comes into the site. All the rest of the wiring in the site is going to be underground.
I misunderstood each other. I didn't ask that question, or what else leave it yet. What I was asking, I wasn't asking about power lines per se. I was just saying that underneath the power lines, National Grid kind of maintains a shrub brush habitat that, and I'm wondering, and that means they have to periodically come in and cut. I'm asking if there's a maintenance effort and plan to keep sort of a shrub brush habitat in that area, or are you just planting trees that won't grow tall?
We're planting shrubs as well. There's currently hardly no shrubs in that area in particular. So we're adding additional shrubs for that understory character to create the shrub.
And if white pines and such decide to come up in that area,
then they'll be maintained.
They'll be maintained to keep them from growing.
The vegetative buffer around the site is meant to be maintained 25 feet everywhere, all around the site. That's existing vegetation maintained. If there is disease or something that happens in one of those areas, obviously there needs to be a tree removed, something replanted.
So the total width of the buffer from the areas that the public can totally see, say from the roads, to where it's tapered all the way down to the grass, is 25 feet.
No, it's 80 to 120.
Okay, so the 25 feet, show me the 25-foot buffer here, please. I just pointed out on that cross section.
This cross section here, this is the roadway to the property line. It's about 35 feet from the edge of the roadway. Then there's a 25 feet to here. That's existing. That's going to be maintained as well. And then this is at its smallest. We have 20 feet, but it goes up to 40 feet and 50 along there. So that's 60 plus 20 feet.
35 feet you said was to the property line?
From the edge of the roadway to the property line, there's 35 feet of right-of-way.
Well, that's part of the road.
Yep, that's all that vegetation. We're not planning to do anything with that. That will stay. Then there's 25 feet.
I'm sorry, 35 feet. Who's the owner of that?
That would be the town. Or town or state. It's a right-of-way. It's a roadway.
Okay, so it's part of the road.
Then there's 25 feet from our property that we're also maintaining for existing vegetation. Then at a minimum, it's 20 feet new vegetation to help steep down. This is where it just gets necked down, but it's up to 40 feet, the majority of that.
So where's the shorter buffer that stores the panels? I don't see it on your sketch.
We have it in here, right up to the fence line. So this is a tree in the background. It's a little.
Oh.
It's a cut.
All right. Okay. So that's not a true cross section. I mean, it's a jig cross section.
It's a cross. Yeah. It's a true cross section through here. That the tree.
But that's off in the distance.
The tree buffer is planted like this. So you have to. It's a double row of arborvitaes or evergreen vegetation.
And how tall are you showing that one right there?
I'll show you. It's easier to show on this. We have our evergreens, then our shrubs on the inside of that. These are deciduous trees, and so the shrubs will be all dispersed within this area. On that side of the fence,
right into the trees. I'm sorry.
One at a time, I
I'm sorry.
can order what things. Do you start over?
Yep. We're not mixing, let me start again. On the inside, in that 25-foot vegetative buffer area that we're maintaining, where possible, we will be adding additional shrub vegetation because there isn't any there currently. That'll help buffer the fence. The larger trees will be placed on the inside of the fence, on the property side of the fence. Then from that tree down is where we're going to be integrating more shrubs and understory trees there as well. So we'll be stepping it down from essentially both sides of the new buffer.
Okay, and was that shown on that cross section?
It's easier to see here. This is, at this point, we have all the shrubs just called out here by icon, but you can see we're interspersing the shrubs through the trees, in front of the trees, on the other side of the trees. On the cross section, you can see some of the shrubs here, with some of the new trees here.
All right, thanks, Harry. Anyone else? Mr. Alves?
I just want to make one kind of obvious point for where we live, and that's all these new plantings are wonderful, and the deer are going to feast on them.
That's reality.
Paul Hunter again. I just had a couple questions. We're talking about the buffer for 95, right?
Yes.
That's on the left-hand side of Townsend Road, and going up to the top where the old dump was.
Yeah, so, so this area?
Right. That's really what's buffering the noise, right? Is for the most part. It is on the left-hand side of Townsend Road.
Yes, there are proposed plants as well along Townsend Road where we have that to but this is doing a lot of the buffering, but by adding additional plants on this side, it's a product of across the
Right.
entire.
I guess my question was, so the back side of Townsend Road is in part of the plan, is it? There's no solar panels going up on that.
That's correct. No, it's not on the west side of Townsend Road.
Okay, right. And then the other question I had was, I have the same concern that these other gentlemen have with viewing. I've been assured, so I sat down with the guy that's doing the project, who's in charge of it, and we've been assured that there's going to be buffers there. So I guess my question was, I understand the trees you're planting there. What do you have? When we moved into a housing development in Watson Farm in Wakefield, they had pines that they planted in the back, some kind of pine. And within, I want to say they started out at 6 feet, and within 2 years they were like 15 feet high, and within 5 years they were like almost 20 feet high. Is that the kind of stuff you're going to be putting up?
That's right, yeah, that's white pines and
White pines, okay.
Yeah, last year they grew about 3 feet actually last
That's
year.
incredible how fast they grow. Okay, that is over by significant buffer. We have 40 back of that. Okay. I guess that's what I've got. The setbacks are, my setback I think is 184 feet. So we're not going to be able to see the solar panels. My understanding is the way they're arrayed, so you're not going to see the first one maybe, but you're going to see the last one as it goes on. There's going to be a large array that's going to occupy 90 acres or 50 acres, whatever it is. So you're going to have a lot of solar panels going back.
That's correct.
At depth. Are the trees going to be sufficient to hide the depth?
Yes, that's what they're intended to do. Yeah. The part of the studies here with the grades is that we want to look at that grade. It's very flat through this portion in particular, but it does start to creep up as you go down towards the end. So that's part of the study.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Alves? Okay, then, we get next up.
Before I have my next witness testify, my client tells me he will stipulate that no panel will be located closer than 100 feet from Full Depot Road. That clears up something.
Thank you.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
state of Rhode Island. I work for Sage Environmental, which is located in Rhode Island. Can you spell your last name? Yes. M-U-L-A-N-A-P-H-Y. You're welcome.
Nicole, you prepared the white binder that has been submitted to the council. It's an environmental assessment.
Yes, I did.
And you also have in that binder your own assessment of the projected noise from the
Correct.
project.
Before we start, I'm just going to point out the map is oriented different than the other maps that you've been looking at. This is north now, so 95 running along here. So when you're looking at it.
Now, the noise that emanates from this particular project, it comes from the inverters and the transformers.
Correct. So the only noise generating equipment on the site is the inverters and the transformers. And the way that the site is set up is those are grouped together, so they're not spread throughout the site. So I'll just go to. So on this map, we've got 1, 2, 3 locations of where they're grouped, and at each location, there's 2 what we're calling islands. They're the inverter and transformer island, and there's 20 inverters at each, with the exception of so the northeastern one, which is this one right here, has 10 inverters instead of 20, and that's on each of them. So there's 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. And so when you're looking at this map, the distance to the property line. So for example, here's the Old Depot Road is here. We're 311 feet from the property line.
And have you determined what is the decibel level from each island?
I have. So we've looked at 116 different sound emitting objects. So that's in these 3 distinct locations. So this map, what we're looking at is, so when we do the noise calculation, the first thing we're doing is we're looking at it from a conservative perspective. So we're not taking into account any of the buffering that would happen from any of the trees or shrubs or leaves or any of that nature. It's assuming that it's a completely open field and what that sound would be transferring. And we looked at all 116 objects all together, looking at how much sound would be generated from that. And so this pink dotted line is where you would see sounds less than 40 decibels once you go past that. And so 40 decibels, just to give you an idea, that is background noise. If you were walking around the woods, that's just what you're hearing is 40 decibels. And there's been a study by the World Health Organization that says any sound below 40 decibels has no health impact. It's not going to wake you from sleeping. And just from a person hearing that, it will have no impact to their quality of life. And so, as you can see, the only area where there would be any sound that somebody would notice is right on the property in the, right near where those sound emitting objects are. We did look at, since the closest neighborhood is down here along Old Depot Road, and so looking at just the sound coming from these inverters and transformers, it was ranged from 25.37 decibels up to, for lot 65, which is right here, which is the closest, was 29.8 decibels, and so that was at the, where their houses were located. And so what that means is it's much less than background noise, so they wouldn't hear the difference. It takes 3 decibel sound difference in order to the human ear to recognize that sound. And background noise for this area, so I had gone out and walked the site. So I walked the site and conducted noise measurements to find out what the background sound for that area was. And so what you're looking at here is a graph where I recorded sound for 2 minutes, and then this is the sound in decibels. So now just for comparison, 40 decibels is really that background sound. And you can see due to the proximity of it being near 95 and the cars, you actually get some noise pollution from the cars that travel. This location right here is right on that end of Townsend Road, right where, kind of that corner of the property where it is adjacent to 95. So that's why it is the loudest. You can hear the sound from the cars. And then as you got into here, so I looked where the old dump was located. I went down to Old Depot Road. One thing to point out when I was on Old Depot Road, which was location 5, which you probably can't see from this graph, is this purple line, which is right here. It was slightly more elevated than what I expected, and I think it was because at the same time while I was there, someone was blowing leaves, and so I waited a while, but they have very large yards, so it wasn't done. So I think there's some noise interference from the blowing of the leaves during that time frame. But it was in line to really, kind of more of an urban background noise where you would hear the cars. And when I went out, it was midday, it was 11 o'clock on a Thursday, when I went out.
Now, when you say ambient noise, that means the normal background noise?
The normal background noise.
And I would imagine on this particular site and just off this site, you would have a lot of car noise from Route 95.
So that's what we're experiencing
That's
here.
what this graph indicates.
Because if there was no 95, there's no any noise pollution, no leaves blowing in the wind or anything like that, you would be down in the 30 decibel, which is really right where I'm at the bottom of it, which is right down here. But especially right now with the trees filled in, you hear the rustling of the trees, and that brings you up again into the 40 decibels as well.
And all your projections, your noise analysis, is based upon there being no dissipation of noise on the site. It's not taking into consideration the noise from other sources.
Correct. So it's assuming, not that this is being done at the site, but if you went in and you leveled the area, you put the sound emitting objects there, and all that noise was to dissipate freely with having no blocking, so it's looking at it from a worst case perspective, the noise that would be generated from there. And in all cases, anything exceeding background noise is just located immediately at those inverters, the inverter islands.
The panels themselves don't make any noise.
The panels themselves, so on that map, so on this map, where we're looking at these lines, those represent the panels. And so these make absolutely no noise, they're stationary. It is these inverter islands, so there's 1, 2 in this location, 3, 4 in this location, and 5, 6 up here.
You mentioned the standard, the World Health Organization standard.
Correct.
And is that a nighttime standard?
It's a nighttime standard, so it was put together for large cities in what should be the sound that they should try to achieve to make a healthy environment for the individuals that live there. And so they looked at a lot of studies looking at humans at different sound levels and impacts that it could have on the body. And so they came up with a sound of 40 decibels would have no health impairments to people. And it wasn't specific for solar, it's just noise in general. So really it's designed more for cars in the city, but it's any sound that a human can hear. And yes, it is looking at it for nighttime, since someone would be awakened the most when they're sleeping. So during the day, these would not be making any sound whatsoever, but if somebody was napping during the day, the sound that would be emitted from here wouldn't be noticed because it's below background.
And you have applied that nighttime standard to
be conservative.
daytime conditions.
Correct, to be conservative, I looked at the threshold for waking from a sleep.
Could I see the map that has the circles on it?
Yes.
So what your, is, am I mistaken, but your testimony is, outside that circular area, everything is below 40 decibels?
Correct. So everything outside of that circle is below background noise.
Same thing on the one in the middle?
Correct.
And same thing on the one to the south?
Correct. And so regarding noise, there was, I know that there was concern about the clearing of where these solar panels would be going and about the reduction of the sound buffering that's happening from 95 from here. So this forest is a very lean forest. I can get into, we hired a certified forester to conduct a forest assessment to provide us information on the size of trees, the density of trees. And it was, out of all the areas that we looked at in Hopkinton, it was the least populated, it had the lowest density of trees. And a lot of it was due to, talking about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So within the last 20 years, it was evident in the area where it would be, so the forester went through and looked at the wetlands area, and then they individually looked at the area that would be cleared for the solar panels. And the wetlands area did have slightly more trees, but not much. So he looked at it based on per acre, the number of trees. So in the wetlands area, there was 158 trees on average per acre, whereas the area that would be cleared is 144 trees per acre. Roughly about 50 acres is going to be cleared for the solar panels. So that equates to 7,200 trees that would be cleared. Just to compare it to other areas that we looked at, we were in the 30,000 to 20,000 range of trees. So this is a much thinner forested area. So what was discovered when we went in there was that because it was clear cut, recently being within the last 20 years, it wasn't done in a sustainable way. It was just gone in and cut, and it left a lot of stress on the remaining trees. They were top heavy, and the tops were off of them. It was also looking at the soil in the area. There was a lot of deciduous trees, a lot of brush in there, and the soil really is dry and had sandy conditions, and it was really more suitable for conifers. So if the area were to really be populated, it would need to be repopulated. If someone was going to do some sustainable forest management in this area with conifers, which is the white pines. When looking at the area as a whole, it was the wetlands that really were the, it's protected from the state, but also, when we built on it, that was where there's better trees.
And you're testifying from a report that's in your binder?
Right, so.
From a forester?
Correct.
And that gentleman's name was Mr. Cassidy?
Correct, Greg Cassidy. He's a certified forester in the state of Massachusetts, and here Rhode Island doesn't have a certification process, but he is registered with the National Organization.
So is it your testimony that the clearing of the trees will have no effect on the noise levels on the property?
It could, if it was just cleared and nothing was being done, you could see an effect from it. But the trees have about 5 to 8 decibel reduction to them if they're planted in that layered effect. So the way that the natural growth of the trees have a little bit of sound buffering, but nothing like if you drive along some sections 95 and you see these thick tree areas that look like a fence, a lot of times you'll actually see kind of a cement wall and the trees backing it. Those were purposely put there to reduce sound. This is just a natural buffer. It's not doing a significant amount of reduction. The increase by putting them here, they're being layered, so that actually is being, the way that they're being placed is being placed how you would do a buffering for sound. Up along here, they're staying as they are. There's not going to be any change to them or anything like that.
And the residences on Old Depot Road, what is the decibel level there?
So in this area, it was around 25. I had actually, I don't really have them on here. I have a smaller map that goes through. So lot 9, so starting right down here, it was 25 decibels, 25.37, and then as you go over to the west, so this direction, so lot 2, it was 25.68, and then there's a 25, 26 decibel range, which again is below the background noise, so it wouldn't be noticeable. So I'm saying a number, but if I went out there and this is put in and I measure it, it's going to be greater than that because your background noise is greater than
Nicole, is this designation, this line, does that mean anything?
That is one of the colors for the contour. So that's going from here to here. It's saying it's 25 to 30 decibels. And then from here outward, it's 23 to 25 decibels. Again, remembering that it's below background. Once you add background noise into it, you have to.
Now, you mentioned the state of Rhode Island with this property. Is this property in any type of management plan?
So we looked at, there's the Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan that so the Fish and Wildlife, the Rhode Island DEM got together and they looked at statewide data. So they looked at aerial photography and looked at the tree coverage. They looked at where the lakes and the waters and where observed sightings of different wildlife have been found. And they put together what they call natural heritage areas, and they provide information on where sensitive sites would be. So this is habitat to where sensitive or endangered species would be found. And what we're looking at here, so on this map, natural heritage would be represented as brown, which we don't see any on here. So this red line is outlining the site. And so we do have this green right here, which is saying that it's part of an unfragmented forest. So an unfragmented forest means it's part of a larger forested area. So I have a figure here that's just taking a big zoom out so that you can see this whole unfragmented area. And so this is really the big chunk of the forest. And the reason why you have an unfragmented forest is it allows the wildlife and it allows the plants to move about and move freely. Just to hop back to this one for one moment because I forgot to mention it. You can't see it actually. There is the river that runs along here, the Wood River, and along the Wood River, which is right here, is a corridor. And so that's the corridor for the wildlife during migration. That's, think of it, the superhighway for critters. And so having this unfragmented allows them to move here. Now the nice thing about this property is it's not cutting off or segregating any of that. So even though it's part of this larger forested area, it is not changing the ability of animals to be able to freely move because it's on the outer section of it. However, the developer realizes that, so to step back on what this Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan is it doesn't mean that any developers have to adhere to it. It's saying and identifying these are areas that we'd like to see wildlife have made available to them. So if you can find different areas, then conserve it for wildlife. And so we looked at another piece of property that is in Canachet Driftway, and this outlined in black. And it's the same, so it's 60 acres of land, so slightly greater land than what would be developed on. And it's also part of a unfragmented forest. And it's closer, it's about 2 miles south of Rockville Management. It's in a very instead of being a 95. And so we actually had the same forester go out and look at this property and determine from a forest perspective is one, if you had to rate them, if you were going to have to conserve one, which one would you prefer to conserve based on a forest and a wildlife standpoint? And so this one actually ranked higher, not only because it's located, it's not near 95, but it was very, very large trees, very, very, it had not been clear cut like what had happened up along the site that we're looking at right now, Blue Walk. There had been some gypsy moth infestation that has killed some of the trees. However, those trees within 10 years, they would reestablish to a young forest. There's some already hiking trails, so from a recreational use, use it. And so the developer has agreed to, if the site goes forward, to take this lot of land, purchase it, and then donate it to the land trust to have it preserved for conservation.
And when you say he's purchasing the development rights of the property.
Correct.
Right. Not the entire property.
Correct, sorry.
As a whole.
Correct.
But there are, let me see if I understand this. There are no restrictions on the site on 95.
There is no restrictions, no. It was a statewide effort for DEM and the wildlife to try to take a step ahead and look at areas that might be good for conservation. It means that one would have to go in and do a actual in situ evaluation, meaning walking the land, determining is it really, so in this case, if it's part of that unfragmented forest, is it really a pristine forest? And when we did go into it, it's not pristine. It actually needs help, not this one, but Louisville Alton, in order to make it pristine again, because the way that it was managed previously was not done in a sustainable forest practices. So they would have to, effort would have to be put in to make it a pristine forest again. So there's nothing that binds anybody from doing anything to it. It's just a way to identify.
And when you say it's a migratory highway, now you're talking about birds.
No, so migratory highway is for all wildlife, but it's not on the property. It's actually, so right here is the river. So any wildlife would still have the ability to migrate along it. And this is, so the other portion of the unfragmented forest is it provides that inner forest. And really, when you look at this unfragmented forest, the only area where you're getting this inner forest is right here. Because this is still too small to really provide that inner forest experience for wildlife. It's really that wildlife highway, that corridor.
So the applicant has instructed you to find another parcel of land?
Correct.
To kind of replace this parcel?
Correct. And so that's how the Comanche Creekway was identified.
And what's the assessors plan and lot number?
So it's map 14, block 59.
And I'm going to show you a property card. Is that the property card for that property?
Yes, it is.
Owned by Mrs. Gardner? And the applicant has made arrangements to acquire the development rights to the site?
Correct.
If this application goes forward, to substitute the development rights?
Correct. So there's no requirement to do that. What he's doing is he's saying that this would be a good way, since the state has looked at some land, so this may be a good lot of land to identify for conservation. But after going in, it's not the best, it's not a pristine environment. But in lieu of that, since we're developing there, let's take a good chunk of land and designate it for conservation. And this is it's in agreement. This actually is abutting on this side. Other conserved area, and then if you look, that brown color that I was talking about, the natural heritage, that's right here. So what that means is the DEM has identified, actually it's the National Heritage Association has identified that they're sensitive or endangered species there.
And it's your understanding that the applicant is not attempting to sell the development rights?
For this
for this land?
Correct, no, it would be donated to
They would be
the,
donated to either land trust, or conservation commission, or some charitable fund.
correct. The other thing on this is that there are no wetlands, so it is a great wildlife habitat. Do you want me to go on some?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. Since I was looking at the trees, I was also looking at the overall carbon footprint from this site. So I looked at, if you were to clear 7,200 trees, how much carbon would be lost from the sequestration of those trees that are being removed. I also looked at carbon dioxide that would be emitted as part of the life cycle of the photovoltaic system, so building the equipment, transferring the equipment, the maintenance of it, and then I compare that to if you had 13.75 megawatts of energy being generated by coal or gas, how much carbon dioxide would be emitted. And so looking at that difference, I then figured out the net benefit. So it ranged from 19 million to 50 million pounds of carbon dioxide per year. So by offsetting our energy by using the solar, where if you want to look at it by trees, it means that you've planted anywhere from 98,000 to 257,000 trees. Because we have to plant that many to take that much carbon dioxide out.
So there is a net benefit
There is a net benefit.
from using solar
Correct.
rather than a fossil fuel?
Correct. Correct. There were some other aspects that we looked at. As part of that environmental assessment, that binder that you saw, we went through, if you were to do the solar development of this size, what are all the potential environmental impacts that could occur? So we looked at the land use and future development, and I'm not going to get into the details of that because Joe Bombard is here and he's been talking about that, but that's found in Appendix F, where it was found that there's no real impairment to this. Just the change of the zoning that would have to occur. We looked at the geology, the soils, and the farmland, and as Hoffman reported, there is a portion of that site that is contaminated, and so the development of this will be cleaning that up. So it's actually a beneficial impact because you're cleaning that up. There was some prime farmland, which was located right in this area. It was a small portion of 0.7 acres. The rest of the soil was just some sandy soil. Any exposed soil, as Kevin expressed, it's all going to be covered with vegetation, so there's no concern of erosion. We looked at the groundwater and found no impacts to that. It actually is going to be beneficial because they will be doing remediation to the sites and preventing contamination of the groundwater. But none of the activities involved in the construction or the long-term use of this would have any impact to the groundwater. We also looked at surface water and no impacts to that. There's going to be a 100-foot buffer along the edge of that where there will be no development. We looked at the wetlands, which was expressed by Dupree. There's going to be no building during the wetlands. Appendix E of that binder provides a study of what went through identifying the wetlands. It's not in a floodplain area, so there's no impacts for flooding. We looked at the wildlife habitat and vegetation, which is what I went through where we evaluated the Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan. I think you had asked earlier about the white pines, if there was any concern about species there. There are 6 species of bird that are known.
Princess pine.
Oh, it was Princess pine. Well, it was white pine was what was identified on that property. And so I'm not a bird specialist, so I apologize for those that are, not the wording of the species. But the northern goshawk, the least flycatcher, the purple finch, the yellow-rumped warbler, the blue-headed miro were found by looking at, again, that statewide data from the Wildlife Action Plan, that they have the potential to be found there. None of them are endangered or sensitive, and and we will have that buffering around the edge to provide habitat for them. And I think as Kevin spoke before, that buffering, when determining the plantings, we'll be looking at plantings that not only are native, but that also promote habitat for sensitive species to provide more environment for them. Really looking at what's being done, not on this site, but at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They have the Great Picket National Wildlife Refuge, where their objective there is actually to generate habitat for sensitive and endangered species. And I think some of the audience mentioned the deer. The deer are eating actually all of that vegetation for them. So they're trying to promote the growth of that vegetation to provide habitat for them. And this area will be fenced. It is going to have a 6-inch gap at the bottom of it to allow small critters to come in and out, but it's going to prevent deer from coming in. So it's going to prevent them from eating that. So not only will it promote the growth of habitat for these sensitive species, and also from an aesthetic perspective, anything planted inside of that fencing, so on the property line, would remain intact because the deer would not be able to get at it. Talked about carbon, noise, visual aesthetic, Kevin already spoke about. The objective of the developer is to make sure that nothing is visual, so we found no impacts to it. During the construction, there would be minor impacts because construction activities would be occurring, but it would be comparable to any construction on that site, not particular to the solar. There will be no artificial lighting at this facility, so there's no concern from a lighting perspective. We also looked at if there would be any transportation, if there would be any impacts from that. We found no impacts from transportation. There's no safety concerns, no change in the traffic patterns. RAD professional engineers provided the traffic safety assessment that can be found in Appendix A of that binder. We also looked to see from a socioeconomic perspective, this is going to bring additional tangible tax revenue to the town. So over the 30 years, not looking at property tax, just looking at the amount of revenue that would be generated from the energy generated here. We're looking at $2 million to the town over 30 years. And then we have another expert here, Peter Scotty, who will talk about any changes to the real estate issues found that there were none. From a waste management and pollution prevention, this is actually a beneficial impact because there is that landfill that will be cleaned up. So it's going to be removing contamination, we're removing the soils so that they're visually free of those glass and salt free, and then it will be capping it to prevent any spread of those heavy metals. And then the activity of the solar farm is not going to be generating any hazardous material or any waste of that nature. Any waste generated during the construction of it would be properly disposed of, following all regulations. So to conclude, we looked at overall from the state of Washington to see, there's been several solar development projects, and so we added in this chunk of land also being developed as solar, and looking at the entire town, we're looking at just over 1% of the town having solar. And so that's looking at all these large solar projects as well as incorporating in some smaller 1-acre solar projects. So it's still a relatively small.
Nicole, this project, solar, does it require any septic system?
No septic.
No septic, no lighting.
And no what?
Lighting.
No lighting and no septic, correct.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You spoke to a number of, you were talking about the trees.
Yes.
And the noise. And you talked about another piece of property that apparently is better suited for, it's got better for it. So my question is, in previous testimony, the Whipple Alton site, they were looking at, about 150 trees per acre.
Correct.
So how many trees per acre is this other parcel?
don't have
That I
that.
didn't see anywhere.
Yes, I don't have that information when the forester went in. I didn't get an inventory of how many trees were in there. Purely because when we were looking for an inventory of trees, I was trying to determine how many were going to be cleared. And for the conservation, I would be able to get an inventory of the trees.
I noticed that the other property owned, that the Contra Driftway one, had a cleared area. Is that one of the home sites?
Yes.
Okay.
Right
That's
here.
an home site?
So this dark green that you're seeing, that is a shading over it to denote that this is an unfragmented, part of a larger unfragmented forest. And so the dark green means it's 500 acres or more that it's part of. This just is not filled in because of the home is already there. And so the developer would, the homeowner would stay on here and then the rest of it.
That is very close to or part of, any part of that property? Is it part of the Pawcatuck Woodlands? Or is it it must be very close?
It's very close to it, yes.
So it's part of that,
I believe that's right on this.
that dark area that runs from Maine down into Connecticut, Rhode Island, right? That's it. That's not spice.
I'm really good at that.
Yeah, I have several questions. I'm going to go back sort of to the beginning.
Yes.
There are three, let me go back to the sound.
Yes.
There are three paths, and you have 20 inverters on 4. You've got inverters. How many inverters per path? 1, 2, and 3, and transformers. Because one you said has 10 and 10.
Yes. So there's actually 6 islands, sorry, 6 inverter islands, and with 3 locations. So
Correct.
there's 2, 2, and 2.
Correct.
And so this one in the north, it only has 10 inverters on each island.
Okay, so that is a total of 10 plus 10. Is there a transformer then?
Correct. Each one of those also has a transformer.
And 2 transformers. And then, so the other islands, the 2 and 2, are 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, and then...
So if you look at it per location,
Right.
these 2 locations each have 2 transformers and 40 inverters.
So they have 4 transformers total and 40 inverters.
And then this up here has 2 transformers and then 20 inverters.
Yeah, 20 and...
And there's also the solar designer who will be speaking to you after me, who can provide a lot more detail on this.
And that's on the cement pad.
Correct.
As far as the sound, I know it's not geometric, but I believe it's algorithmic.
Yeah.
So your the structure where the 40 decibels are, I think was very well done. I think this is the first time we've seen a plan that has been centered instead of at the edges.
So that was actually by design, yeah.
It's a much better design than we have seen in the past, and it does help the neighbors a great deal.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say I appreciate that. Now on to the next property. That answered my sound question. And you were talking about the carbon footprint of the other property. If we protect this property by having the developer buy the development rights and give them to the land trust, which is very lovely gift, how much carbon footprint are we saving that will not be?
I didn't look at that because I didn't look at the number of trees on this property. The carbon footprint that I was telling you about just earlier was disregarding any addition. So that by saving the trees here, you're going to have carbon dioxide removed from the environment. That was not factored into it. So actually, the amount of carbon removed is actually greater than what I presented.
That would be very beneficial.
Right.
That's what I wanted to make sure you know. And now, if you buy the development rights on this property so that it cannot be developed, does that mean that the homeowner cannot build?
Have to defer to the developer on that question. I don't know what was decided.
So when that house is sold, it can only be sold as is, where it is. Nothing can be built onto the house, next to the house, near the house.
I have to defer that to the developer. I haven't been in communications with them about the agreement on that.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. I
Yeah.
do like the idea of bringing the development rights to the land trust. I think that's great. I don't know the ramification to the homeowner. Okay, that was my question.
Okay, David.
Yeah, Nicole, four quick things. The decibel readings you took on Old Depot Road
Yes,
in the 27, 28 range, that was taken with the trees that are there now.
correct.
So it may not be that low if those trees are taken out and solar panels are put in, is that correct? It could be higher.
Correct. So I took those readings in May, the foliage had already grown in.
So,
However, there are deciduous trees, there are bushes, and those are what's blocking the sound. There are some white pine that are also doing it.
Yep, yep.
So the sound in the winter, so if I'd gone out and done the sound in the winter, that would be closer to what you would see once it's cleared.
okay, so I just want to make sure that we understood that 27, 28 range,
So it was actually 45?
45
Yep,
on Old Depot Road.
correct.
I thought that outer circle on the three.
So what you were
inverters-
looking at on that figure was me calculating the sound from the inverters and transformers, not looking at the addition of the background sound. So that was just the increased noise that this would be generating. This right here is looking at that background sound.
Okay. Yeah. No, and we've spoken before because you've been here before. And I've asked this question before. Is it possible, if there is a problem, I'm not saying there's going to be, if there's a problem with the inverters and the transformers making more noise than we'd like to have, can't we put a buffer around these transformers?
There is, yes.
A sound absorbent buffer or some sort
Yeah.
around these things?
So the most effective is they have what they call noise curtains.
Yep.
And really, you would put a chain link fence around that island of inverters and transformers.
Yep.
And then you would put the noise curtain around that, and it would reduce that sound. Because planting trees, it depends on how, if it's just a few decibels, that is the difference in trees, you do it. But if it's for, you're not expected to be a humming sound, but if you did hear that, that is something.
It is possible, it is possible.
It is something, yeah.
And I'm not trying to be sarcastic here,
Yeah.
but I think I told you this last time. When you compared the carbon absorption by the trees compared to the carbon savings by putting the solar panels,
Yep.
it's not the idea that, geez, why don't we cut down all the trees and cover the land with solar panels?
Right.
I don't want to do that. And that's why living in Hopkinton, when I drive along the road, I like the green. I like green energy, but I like the green of the trees. And I think that's why people live here. So let's keep that in mind. That's a nice idea, and I like the idea of, keeping the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere down. But there's a point where you say, okay, we've got to have trees and we've got to have solar panels, and there's got to be a
It
good balance.
needs to be done sustainably.
Right.
And so trying to look at it from a large picture, so looking as you are doing the entire town.
Yeah.
Because you can put them in, but you don't want to clear the entire town from it, because then you're going to take away from really the environment. So when you're looking at the entire overall environmental health of your town, you have to look at everything. And so that was why I made the comment about it's still a small percentage of the town that is solar, but you would want to take it one step further to look at how much is cleared for forest.
Bring me to my final point. You said 1%. I believe it was 1%. That's of the total land area.
Correct.
How much are we talking about with undeveloped land? Solar panels take up of all of them. There's developed land in the town and there's undeveloped land in the town.
Correct.
You can't count the developed land.
Correct.
Let's talk about the undeveloped land. How much, what's the percentage of solar versus undeveloped land?
I don't have that number, I could come up with that number, I don't have that number
Yeah.
because
It's difficult.
there's not a good data layer that breaks apart
Right.
undeveloped and developed, because I originally was hoping to be able to use actually some of the data from the Wildlife Action Plan to
Yeah.
try to assess that, but it discounts, it doesn't incorporate these chunks of undeveloped areas that are in some of the community, as it only is looking at things that are connected, that are 250 or 500 acres in size.
Okay.
So I don't know that number. This was looking at the entire
town.
acreage of the town.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Certainly.
exactly what you would want to look is you have some farmland, you have residential.
Right, and I think that's what the townspeople want, the residents of the town want to know, is how much of the forested land, as one of the reasons why they live here, is being, taken over by solar operations. And not so much, you're not going to put it in a neighborhood, you're going to put them on this undeveloped land. So it's probably, I'm going to take a guess and say it's probably more like 6 or 7%, but that's,
It could possibly,
yeah,
yes.
that's right.
One of the things that the developer, as I don't think I mentioned today, is when the site no longer would be used for solar, they would reforest it back so that it's 30 years is the life cycle, typical lifestyle of the solar farms. So after it's been used, those solar panels being removed, it would be reforested. It's actually interesting, the removal of those solar panels scours the ground. This is
Yeah.
something I learned from the forester. I didn't realize this actually makes the ground perfect conditions for seeding. And seeding for conifers, which the Woodlawn area, the soil there being sandy soil, is good for conifers. So in a sense, the process of decommissioning the solar
Right.
farm actually prepares the soil for planting of the
30 or 40 years down the way.
but 30 years down the line.
I'll come out of the nursing home and check it out. Thank you.
About the ground.
That's good. Nicole, just one question from me. What size is the parcel that the developer wants to buy the rights to?
Around 60 acres. I think it's said on that piece of paper that's been given. It's like 62.3 or something.
64?
Second page.
Oh, okay. All right, that's all I have. Okay, anyone else?
I got one.
Oh, Tom, sorry.
After listening to her, talking about the noise, clear cutting those areas. The solar panels are how high at their highest point?
I believe it's about 8 feet, but I'm going to let the
Okay,
developer
all right.
speak upon that. Since it's
And they're facing away from 95. Okay, so wouldn't those solar panels also help reduce some of the noise?
They could.
As a
Yes.
wave that comes across, we can catch those and drive them down that wave into the ground instead of.
It absolutely, it could.
Playing
I
devil's
don't-
advocate there.
So since it's at that, like you're saying, since it's on that slope, and it's sound waves that are traveling, and it's based on the construction since it's metal, it is possible that the sound can be amplified or dampened. If being in this direction, it actually is going to capture some of that sound and actually reverberate it back to 95. I don't know how much or anything, but in theory, that is exactly what should happen.
And also the wetlands area, that's going to stay vegetated also.
That's
On both
untouched.
sides, so there'll be.
So 50% of the property is untouched. And it's actually from a wildlife perspective, since it's spread about in here, it's actually nice to give them some pockets of area. But from a noise perspective, that's also will remain a buffering. Like what we were looking at the noise calculations that I did, assumed there was no buffering whatsoever, so that any noise generated would be the worst what we would expect.
Okay, anyone else in the audience, any questions for Nicole? Harvey?
So solar's not operating, there's no noise generated off of the property by anything electric or mechanical.
I'm sorry, Ron, can you speak up a little? No.
The property at night when the solar is not operating, so there's no noises coming off of that site at nighttime.
Correct. At night, there's no noise whatsoever.
And so let's say day one, they just finished the project and they turn it on, the solar ran for that day. And that evening is, let's say the homeowners along Old Depot Road, are they going to have higher noise at night because they can hear 95 louder?
They shouldn't, since there's going to be buffering along Old Depot Road and then that strip along 95 is day. I wouldn't expect it to be more than what you would see in the greatest would be in the wintertime when those trees have lost their leaves. Without doing a full assessment, I couldn't give you a guarantee on that, but looking at the quantity that's going to be removed, and then since Old Depot down here, those trees are going to be done in a layering approach. So when you're building a noise fencing with trees, you do it in that layer, and it has to be completely filled in. Where right now, these trees are very sparse, there's a lot of space between them. You've got very low ground coverage, and then you've got very high coverage, but in between where that sound is traveling, you don't really have very much. And so it's allowing sound to go through there.
So the sound level down here will be something equivalent to a wintertime sound level.
Is what I would expect.
And of course in the summer they have the windows open. So, and they don't in the winter, so that would seem like they might hear more noise than they're used to.
It's possible without actually taking in the increased vegetation and the buffering, and then the clear trees, I wouldn't be able to give a definitive answer.
And just a second question regarding the property over on the Comanche Giftway. So I believe I heard it mentioned it would, the offer would be to give it to the land trust?
That, I believe, the land trust to conserve it, to have it.
Do you know if the land trust owns any easements now?
On that property?
No, any easements anywhere in town? I know that they have 2 farm easements.
Okay.
And that's because for a farm, you have to have a farmer. So the land trust has an interest in working with farmers for easements. I'm not sure that I've ever heard them express any interest in holding an easement on a general piece of property, a piece of woods or something. They would prefer to have fee simple, where the public can actually make use of the property. Typically, the difference in cost, easement cost versus fee simple is like 80% of fee simple. So whether fee simple ownership of that property or maybe fee simple ownership of a slightly smaller part of that property would probably be a whole lot better for use for the public and for the town.
The developer is the one that's had the communication with the land trust, so I believe he's going to be speaking later, so he may have an answer to that question.
I would like to see that addressed. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else for the call? Okay. Ben, how many more witnesses you got?
Three or four.
You want to just continue it, or what do you want to do? Because I've got a bunch of stuff on the agenda here, and I think we've got to quit by 11, so what do you think?
I'd love to try to finish.
Well, and I'd love to get our agenda done too, so, that's the plan.
3 hours at the same time.
Yeah, we can do a small break. Yeah, 5-minute break, folks. Okay, folks, we're going to continue with the hearing. Because of the time, we're going to have one more witness that is from the state of Colorado that Mr. Nacarado wants to have us here. And then we're going to continue the hearing, I guess, until 2 weeks from now, which I think is July 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, is the next council meeting. and then we're gonna get on with the rest of our agenda. We just have to finish by 11, so please try and facilitate that. Then,
Yeah, that's one question.
Oh, okay, one question.
Nicole, on the question of the noise coming from 95 emanating to Old Depot Road, isn't it true that you have 2 vegetated wetlands that will remain in effect?
Correct.
And will they do anything to buffer the noise?
They'll do exactly what they're doing now to buffer the noise. Because they're untouched, they're not changed. So any noise that's coming from 95, so if you want to think of a passing car, it comes out in rings. And so as it goes through here, it's going to get buffered, just as it's doing now.
And those wetland areas will not be touched?
Not touched
They're
at all.
not allowed to be touched?
They're not allowed, yes.
By DEP?
Correct.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Jake Wilson, solar designer. I designed EP.
You can move that up, Jake.
Oh, here we go.
And you are from the state of Colorado, are you?
Yes, sir.
And you have been engaged to design the solar panels on this site?
Right, I did the preliminary layout.
Okay, could you take us through the preliminary layout, please?
Sure. Like Nicole stated, we have 3 different inverter locations. So we have 2 pads at each location. So we have a total of 6 islands or 6 inverter pads.
Could you pull up the sheet there that has the pads on it, please?
Yep. You can. Yeah, you can kind of see it.
Get over here, man. Over here.
Yeah, so I just tried to locate the pads as far, centrally located as far away from the property boundaries as possible to minimize noise. And like Nicole just said, we will have the wetland buffers in there that I did not touch at all. It was right wetland requirements. And one of the things I've heard tonight, we have over 46,000 solar panels out on site. And one of the things that I would like to do is increase this buffer to the south here so we could remove a few panels to increase this buffer for the neighbors.
You're talking about on the Old Depot Road side?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, your site where the inverters and the transformers are they all located outside the wetland area?
Yes, sir.
And do you agree with Nicole's interpretation that the noise emanating from the inverters and transformers there to conform to this not above 40 decibels?
I do, and it's strictly a daytime operation.
Yeah, there's not, at nighttime, nothing happens.
Nothing.
And there's no leftover noise in the nighttime?
No.
And let me ask you this. When you're laying out, well, first of all, when you're laying out panels, what do you take into consideration?
You know, just our optimal design is, you know, as south as we can face them. And then we consider a ground coverage ratio, which we call it, which is to minimize the shading in between panels and from, like Kevin stated, from vegetative buffer as well.
Now, you're an electrical engineer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but you're not a professional engineer.
No, we're not.
You're an electrical engineer. And how long have you been laying out panels?
I've
I've been doing large utility scale designs for 8 years, 9 years now.
For another company?
Yep, yeah, yes.
You have your own consulting company right now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what, you say there are 46,000 panels involved in this site?
Right, just over.
And the panels themselves, along with inverters, and are there any other moving parts besides the inverters hung?
Right. It's a fixed tilt design, so that you'll see some other photovoltaic sites where the trackers will rotate on a single axis tracker. We're not doing that here. This is a fixed tilt design, so there's no moving parts as far as the solar is concerned.
And how high are the panels?
9 feet,
8
just
to 10.
depending on grade, undulations, etc.
What do you see on this site as far as grading is concerned?
It's a nice site, I would say. You're not going to have some, until you find your grade, you're not going to really know, but it's a nice site.
Do you have to do any serious cutting and fill?
No, sir.
And in grade, will there be any blasting involved?
No.
And how are the panels affixed to the ground?
So typically there's a driven pile process where the piles are driven to specifications to meet engineering requirements. So you're talking 8 feet would probably be maximum. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 feet would be pretty average for the pile depth.
So you put a pile in the ground,
Yep.
maybe as much as 8 feet, more likely around 5 or 6 feet.
Right.
And affixed to the pile. What's affixed to the pile?
The fixed tilt racking.
A racking system. And the racking systems accommodate how many piles?
It depends on how long your racking is running east to west. But, for a maximum, you'll probably have 8 piles east to west. That's for the structural engineers.
And how high do the piles sit off the ground?
They will sit 3 feet out of grade, somewhere in there.
Now, is the 8 feet height measurement, is that in addition to the 3 feet, or is that taken into consideration, the 3 feet?
Right, so you'll have an additional 5 feet for the racking, and you'll have two modules in portrait. So you're looking at the top edge of the module. Is the 8 feet.
It's no higher than 8 feet?
Right.
What did you mean, what was the term that you used? Something module?
Oh, in portrait?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the modules will sit lengthwise, 2 in portrait, so you'll have one stacked on top of the other. Does that?
Now, how does that work?
You just mount them to the fixed tilt racking. Yeah, there's various configurations that you can come up with, but that's what we're proposing at this point in time.
Do you follow through on the construction of the site?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
Are you doing the maintenance on the site?
No.
You're not. So your job is to lay out the panels, and then you turn it over to a Rhode Island civil engineer, is that correct?
Right. Yep.
In this case, Dupree's office. Okay. Anything else you can tell us about the panels? They're 8 feet high, they're 3 feet off the ground, and you've got 46,000 of them.
No, I'd just like to reiterate that this southern portion, we can definitely remove some modules in here, to increase this buffer and have that be a more substantial setback for visual aesthetics for the surrounding neighbors.
You've heard the stipulation that the developer is willing to accede to
that no panel be located closer than 100 feet from...
Right.
And how many panels would you lose with that stipulation?
It would probably be a couple hundred panels, but we could take more out.
Uh-huh. I don't have anything further from him.
Okay, Ben? All right, David?
Quick as possible, please. You bet. 46,000 panels. How many stanchions per panel? Islands, stanchions?
It depends on your east to west run, but we're just,
Ballpark?
I would say 10 max at your longest east to west run.
So we have 10 times 46,000, is that right?
No, 10, it would be a percentage of 46,000.
Okay. Yeah.
There's 10 for that.
10 per row, and we don't know how many rows it goes, but it's not per row. I'm saying this for the sake of the neighbors. Because it's going to be noisy to put these things in. You know, they're going to be pile driven in, right? Yeah. How long do you suspect, given good weather, they would take you to put in how many stanchions / pylons you need to put in?
A site like this, I would say a month.
A month, okay.
Yeah.
Month to pile drive.
Right.
Yeah. And you're probably the wrong person to ask. The other question I have is if approved, how long would it take to take the trees down? I'd like to know that at some point. How long is it going to take the trees down and pull the stumps out, and that noise associated with that operation also? I'd like to have that at some point, Ben, to let them come forward. But about a month to put the stanchions, and then another few weeks to put the panels on?
Yes, sir.
Great, okay, that's good.
Thanks, David.
All of the wiring and conduit is underground?
Right, so will you manage the heat cable along the backs of the modules, and then you transition underground to the point of interconnection?
On the backs of the modules, is that going across your racking and then down into the ground?
That's exactly right.
Okay, then into the ground, and then it's going to be underground wiring and cabling and conduit.
Right.
The only place you're above ground is at your poles that are going to National Grid.
That's correct.
And is there any particular reason why, and this is a general question, and indeed somebody else may want to answer it, is there any particular reason why we can't underplant solar panels for small animals like ferns or small bushes instead of having them completely grass? I mean, is there any technical reason why that can't be done?
No. You could have some underlayment of vegetation.
So that you could then mow between the panel runs, but under the panels themselves, which are 8 feet long, you could have ferns, small bushes, something to help with the wildlife habitat.
Yes, absolutely.
The only thing I would just add to that, from what I understand the way these work, I would think that would be possible. It's a management thing to try and keep woody plants from being able to get in there and affect the bottom of the panels. So it probably would be something where it'd be much more forbs and things that could be more, sort of mid-height grasses that would have to be weed whacked down at least once a year, though. That would be my guess.
Any questions more from the electric? No.
The only thing I would like to have for the next date, for the next council meeting when we finish this hearing, is I'd like to know a definitive answer from the developers as to exactly how many panels or how far away you're going to be in the depot or how good the buffer's going to be. So if they could just nail that down by the next meeting, I'd be happy.
Do you have any questions for the?
Nope. All set.
All right, then, I guess we're going to continue this hearing until...
Anybody in the public?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Curran.
I have a couple questions for the engineer. You're an electrical engineer, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These operate in DC or AC?
You're taking DC power and converting it to AC power.
Okay, is there any threat of any bleed off from these? Power? Okay, what's the safety zone that needs to be held around those when they're operating?
You know, it's more, you need more of a safety zone around the inverters.
Which is the reason for the fencing and the such.
Right, right.
Okay, is there any reason why those inverters, to venture back to the noise pollution problem, can't automatically just be shrouded like she had spoken about at the beginning of the project? So I don't have to come back after this project is up and running and say, you need to shroud them now.
Right.
We're willing to do that, sir.
Certainly look into it.
We're willing to do that, right? That's not, to answer your question?
Electrical storms. What's the problems with these panels? There's a lot of aluminum out there in the road, on the field. And with my background, electricity travels and travels a substantial distance.
Right.
Sometimes 60, 80 to 100 feet or more from a strike. Do I have any worries about anything, especially with the underground wiring that you're putting in?
No, it's a great point, great question. We can do lightning risk assessments.
Are you going to?
We can, absolutely. Yep.
Well, that's one of the things that I'd like to have done specifically because I'm going to be living in close proximity to it.
No, that's a great point.
And with my professional background, I have concerns about that.
Right.
The other concern that I have, each one of these individual panels, and you said there's
26,000.
quite a few thousand.
Right.
These larger panels are made up of smaller panels, and each one of these smaller panels generates electricity anytime the sun is out. What safety factors are you gonna put on these particular panels to shut them down in case of an emergency?
So there's sophisticated monitoring that happens mainly at the inverter level in the case of an arc flash or a short circuit that can be detected very quickly, easily now. So depending on the technology that you have in the inverter and whatnot, it can be a very nice monitoring system.
I can answer that. Tom Converse, LIG Consultants, registered professional engineer in the state of Rhode Island and every other New England state down through Maryland somewhere.
Okay.
To answer your lighting question, there's lighting protection on the overhead lines coming in. There's surge arresters on every switch. There's surge arresters on the National Grid equipment. And there's surge arresters on every transformer we're putting in. So from a surge perspective of the overhead system, getting onto the underground system, we have surge arresters which will isolate it. We have reclosers where it goes overhead to underground that can isolate the circuit if there's an issue. Every transformer is fed separately from a piece of gear that can isolate that transformer. And on the low side, we'll have switch gear. We'll ground everything in accordance with IEEE Standard 80 for substations and for NFPA 70, which is the National Electric Code, the latest edition. The code has made significant changes with respect to operating these, with disconnects for workers that are operating these, to isolate the DC side as well as the AC side. They're learning as well as the rest of us in the industry. So we're very comfortable that as it gets put in and as it gets designed and as it gets inspected, it'll meet, the latest edition that's approved in the state of Rhode Island for the NFPA 70, which is the National Electric Code.
Okay. Any type of vandalism problems with these units? By way if somebody gets in there and tries to mess or steal some of these units?
Right.
Are you going to find somebody
on
the ground?
I think we're going to have sophisticated security measures as part of the O&M plan with cameras and whatnot. So we're going to do everything in our power to keep people out and mitigate.
There are monitoring cameras on the site 24/7. Okay, actually taking a video motion check.
Are we going to have security people coming through our neighborhood on a continuous basis?
No, not usually. No, that's where we have remote monitoring. If there is a problem, then we send somebody out. If not, then...
Okay, and any vegetation planting underneath the panels will be done to the NFPA regs?
I think we can. I mean, that has to be...
I mean, I know that the Board of Appeal and Review just gave a blanket variance for any type of vegetation under these because it used to be that all of these panels had to be on non-combustible surfaces, and that means no vegetation under them at all. Now they're gonna have the blanket variance allowance for that vegetation, that vegetation gonna be maintained.
Well, I don't want to design the project here tonight, but I mean, we're going to have a registered engineer design this. We'll implement plantings. We've already suggested we'll do nesting boxes and along the perimeter, add shrubs where appropriate. I can't guarantee that we, just like this man said, we don't want to be designing.
I think he's speaking about under the panels.
Yeah.
That's
If Barbara said under the panel, she wanted to know.
Right, but and this is one of the things that she knew. I don't know if you knew there was an NFPA regulation that specifically deals with this.
But I think we can do both. I think we can add plantings that will help Barbara, you know, in terms of what we're trying, what she wants to accomplish, and still not violate, you know, some kind of safety.
Okay, in the meantime, I know Mr. Landolfi has other business that he needs to take to. These are some of the interests that I would like to see as an abutting landowner answered when I come back. Okay, thank you.
Harvey. No, wait. Can you just be very, very quick, please?
Yeah.
I get a half hour left. I get a lot done. We're going to continue in 2 weeks. Anyone can ask their questions then too.
Just if I understood, the applicant's going to increase the buffer, I'm sorry, the setback of the panels on the south side of the property. Is that what I heard?
We're going to study that. Next time we come in here, we'll have the.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I heard you say it. What I was interested in seeing was if in fact you move the panels, say 40 feet back or something, that there'd be more, you know, plantings or trees left there so that there'd be a better buffer as well. That's all.
Okay. We'll figure that out, sure. All right, anything else on this left line there? Okay, folks. It'll be continued for 2 weeks to the next meeting, and we have to get to the rest of our agenda. Next is consent agenda, approved town council meeting minutes of June 4, 2018, executive session minutes of June 4, 2018, accept the court transcript of May 21st, 2018 as a record of the hearing regarding Hopkinton Coastal Plastic Zone Amendment hearing, accept the court transcript of May 21st, 2018 as a record of the decision regarding the Rhode Island Solar Energy Renewal LLC Maxon Hill LLC Zone Amendment Comprehensive Plan Approval Decision. Accept the following monthly financial activity report. Town clerk, set July 2nd, 2018 as the hearing date for a multi-event permit of Holly Tree Campground. Approved request of National Grid and Verizon for a joint pole on Walton Bradford Road. Anything, folks?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. First public forum. Next on my report, just one item. Charter Oak graduation was attended, was last Friday, I believe. Councilor Palmer was there. It was a very, very good graduation ceremony. A lot of very impassioned speeches. And I enjoyed it totally. So, another school year down in 2 weeks. Anyway, town manager report, Bill McGarry.
Thank you. During the first week in June, I worked with Planner Jim Lampier to set up a meeting for June 21st with the town staff and Dave Westcott, basically Associates, to resurrect the zoning ordinance rewrite project now that the town's comprehensive plan has been completed and approved by the council and state officials.
Thank you. Any questions for Bill? Okay. Okay, great, thanks, Bill. First item on the old business, number 1, discuss, consider, and possibly vote on a motion for reconsideration of condition number 6 in the proposed decision of Rhode Island Solar Renewable Energy LLC and Maxon Hill LLC submitted by Vincent Nacarado. Ben, you want to just kind of give us a short preface on what you want changed?
Very much.
That's not. One item to talk about, not all through the whole book.
It's just one item to talk about.
Very briefly, I left my motion in my car, but essentially, the solicitor was kind enough to send me the proposed decision, which I have no problem with other than item number 6 in both decisions. It refers to a standard that does not exist. And the crux of the matter is that where is the 40 decibels measured from? Is it the property line or 3 meters, is it 3 meters from the inverter? Our argument, the standard is from where somebody else can hear it, which means the closest point would have to be the property line. It makes no sense to have it at 3 meters from the inverter. I mean, that could be in the middle of a field somewhere. But I have Nicole here to testify to what the standard is, and very briefly, I will have her put her on and just ask her a couple of questions.
Okay, Nicole, quick.
Oh, you want that? What?
Yeah, thank you.
Give that up.
Oh,
you're back. Here, let's steal it.
Just to add to what Vinny was talking about, in all of the ordinances that I've worked in for various sound things as well as solar, everything has always been measured at the property line. So just as an example, which I can give to you as well here, so Warwick and Cranston, for example, have solar ordinances that have built-in sound requirements to that, and it's at the property line. For Cranston, it is 40 decibels at the property line, and for Warwick, it's 55 decibels at the property line, and a 3 decibel difference. What that means is you look at what the background sound is, and then you look at the sound by adding in whatever the noise generating objects are, and as long as it's not greater than 3 decibels. So there's 2 caveats there for that one. Richmond, for an example, neighboring, is at the property line and it's 60 decibels. Westerly at the property line, 55 decibels. South Kingstown at the property line, 50 decibels. Burrville at the property line, 43 decibels. I'm just going to bring in the state of Connecticut because Rhode Island doesn't have a statewide noise regulation, where Connecticut does actually have that implemented. And theirs is, again, all of these are dependent on if it's a residential, commercial. I'm just giving you the lowest, which is residential. And Connecticut's is 45 decibels. And then just as an example, Allentown, because that's also close to here, which is also part of Connecticut, they defer to the state, which is 45 decibels as well. You're more than, these are just copies. They're downloaded directly from the internet. I don't know if you want them for record, but it just points to the...
Nicole, is there a standard in the World Health Organization, in that booklet, for measuring the decibel level at is a certain distance from the inverters?
No, so the World Health Organization is based on the human ear hearing this sound and the effects that it's going to have on it. So the report that I provided to the council went through the study that they had done, looking at, again, the concern was nighttime noise, mostly in the cities, but they looked at it regardless of where it is, just audible sounds that a human would hear and what type of health impacts would it have. And so their conclusion to that was, as long as it doesn't exceed 40 decibels, then it's not going to have any health impacts to you. There are more sensitive age groups that it could be lower where you could see impacts, but their recommendation is 40 decibels, and anything greater than that you could see some impacts. If you read on it, it later says, because there's a lot of areas that prior to the development of, or the creation of this review, sounds were much larger than that, and so they asked for communities to look at 55 decibels with the anticipation of trying to get down to 40 decibels. Again, this is more for the design was trying to develop kind of communities in a city and trying to reduce the sound for those people that live there. So that's
Okay. Is that it?
I think yes.
Okay. I'll start. Does Barb have some questions? Sylvia, do you have any questions for Nicole or Vincent on this issue?
No, I think we should resolve it.
Okay. Tom? David?
No, yeah, I'd just like to have the option, if we do have a problem with the noise, that we can put up some of those buffers around the inverters and the,
What I would propose is, and this is typically what you see out there, is to perform a noise assessment. So you can do a community noise study where after it's installed, after it's going, there's noise meters that get set up and we put it on the perimeter and you measure the sound and you look to see what the levels are at. And yes, if they exceed 40 decibels, then you have to put a buffer up to reduce it to protect the neighbors.
that's all I ask, and I'd like to have that as part of the agreement, if this thing passes.
And I believe the amendment that Vin is asking for is that it's measured at the property line. So if that noise study is done and it exceeds 40 decibels at the property line, then noise buffering has to occur.
Great. Good.
And I also agree that the noise level should be measured at the property line, not at the inverter, so it doesn't make any sense. Okay. All right. I know Barbara?
I have a lot. I actually read it. I really appreciate all of the information on the guidelines from Europe. It's the World Health Organization's night noise guideline. I thought it was really excellent, and I actually went through it all. The sensitive population are generally babies, the elderly, people who are ill all the time, and also shift workers. We are a community that has EV as the majority, or many of our citizens are shift workers. And it went into quite a bit of detail on the shift work and the problem. And I would like to put in the record so that we all recognize this. I don't have a problem with property line. 40 decibels is a possibility. I think 35 is better. And the reason I say that, and I'll go through that from this booklet that you've given us, 40 decibels is equivalent to the lowest observed adverse effect level for night noise. And this is during the daytime, because you're going to have more of your noise during the day than during the night. So 40 is certainly a possibility. Above 55 decibels, the cardiovascular effects become the major public health concern. Yes. No, I'm going through
Let me ask you, how much are you going to go into? You've got a lot of tabs. I don't think the balance of the council shares your thoughts. So we may, if you want to.
Why don't I do a motion?
Why don't you do a motion?
Into discussion.
Well, it's going to. I don't think the discussion is going to end.
I move that we establish a noise level of 40 decibels or less at the property line.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I have discussion.
Okay. But again, you've got to limit your discussion because, like I said, it's,
I have as much time as I would need. We're staying until 11.
we have the rest of the agenda to go through.
Yes, we do. And we chose
So
to.
motion was made and seconded. All those in favor?
No, I have discussion. And most of this is having to do.
But you're going to be quick, Barbara.
Then you're going to have to wait until I do it quickly. 37 to 41 decibels is where most of the reports begin. And then it goes up from there, and it goes up substantially from there. When you get shift disturbance, shift work as a risk factor for sleep disturbance and health effects, that's one of the major areas. Those are some of the major amounts of citizens who work in our community. And the conclusions are that shift work is increasing age, the sleep of males deteriorates, whereas that of women is relatively well upheld. But the major civilization diseases in Europe, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and burnout, we can go beyond. And you need to pay attention to that. Changes in duration of various sleep, the guidelines and recommendations. 35 is EEG awakening, changes in duration is 35. This is where your threshold of observed effects are. Shift workers are 30 to 40. A number of effects of sleep observed from this range: body movements, awakening, self-disturbance. This is all adverse effects, starting at 30 decibels, not at 40 decibels. The situation is increasingly dangerous at 55. Night noise guidelines, 50 could work out just fine.
Barbara, excuse me for a
Yeah,
minute.
but 35 is better.
Barbara, let Tom talk.
No, I'm trying to ask Barbara a question. We're looking at the property line
Right.
at 40 decibels during the day, because there's no noise at night.
Correct.
So all the information that you're giving us, how is that relevant to the 40 decibels? I mean, you
Because
talk,
babies sleep during the day, elderly sleep during the day, sick sleep during the day, shift workers sleep during the
background
day.
noise is going to exceed the 40 decibels as it is. Look at the chart she showed
That's
for
in that one
95.
area.
This is the one we're talking about.
This is the one we're even doing on cities, and saying that 35 and 40, and especially for men, cardiovascular. I mean, this does matter. If you want to do 40 decibels at your property line,
Barbara, you've spoken, we've heard your concerns. David, hold on. We have a motion on the floor, it was seconded, we had discussion. Does anybody else have any particular issues with the issue at hand, which is the 40 decibels at boundary line, property line versus the inverters?
nobody read this. I mean,
Are you kidding?
you read it.
Yes,
okay, hold on.
yes, I did. You
Okay.
should not assume just because we get something this big, we don't read it. We were given.
So a motion was made and seconded. David, do you have any further discussion?
Yes, one little thing, like Barbara and everybody else. I think if we put a condition in the agreement about this project, saying that if the noise level at the property line exceeds what we want, that they are going to be applied.
The 40 decibels.
The 40 decibels, that's the thing we want, that's fine. If it exceeds that, then they are going to be obliged, under the contract, to put up a noise buffer around these.
They agreed to that.
I think
They
now
agreed
it's
to
Right,
that.
and if we put that in the contract, in the agreement, then I think that'll alleviate Barbara's concerns about being much noise at the property line. I would think so, don't make it wrong.
Then we amend the motion. I amend the motion to say that if it's 40 decibels at the property line, if indeed the neighbors feel that that is too high, that they will go back and buffer the inverters and traps.
Fine. I'll set it now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Motion was made and seconded.
So we got an amendment.
Right.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, it is an
Yeah,
amendment.
right.
Right.
So, seconded, any further discussion on the amendment?
I gave him
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Now we have to go to the main motion.
Is the motion for the community members or the tested property, tested decibel level? If it's less than, if it's more than 40, then we have to shut it.
Right, no, it should be less than 40 if the community feels that it's a problem.
Well, the motion is the motion.
The motion is the motion, we've already read that.
Yeah.
We can't stop now if it's less than 40.
People want deeper roots than that.
So we have a motion also on the floor for procedure, and that was seconded by Tom. All those in favor? Aye. All right,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Thank you. All right, next under old business number 2, discuss and consider developing a charge for the proposed 1904 school building subcommittee. Now, Lisa was kind enough to put this in perspective, which was good. I know we've got, I think, 4 today, Lisa, that have signed up there as well. You know, some of the things that I think were important, at least for me, was funding options, salvage companies to look at possibly offsetting the cost of the raising of the building. Whatever else the council wants to put under the charge of that committee is certainly fine with me. Yes.
The town would be the liaison to it.
Yes.
We want to add.
Yeah, if you have something under the charge that you feel it's not there and you think it's important, then by all means.
Under the charter, I'd like to make sure, I'd like to have the committee determine what is of value in the 1904 building that we could salvage for the use of the town. I'm specifically thinking of the weather vane, making sure that that's protected and kept. Possibly wood doors, possibly slate, but I'd like them to look at things in the building that can be saved and recycled. And if anything is valuable, please put it in the vault.
Anything on this charge?
No.
Okay.
We're a little humor, even the little tennis balls that are on the bottom of the desks have value. If you know anybody who's using a walker.
Not me, but my
Me,
mom.
you know,
Oh, that's right.
yeah. Even the tennis balls.
Okay. Any other charges for the committee? Anybody come up with anything different? Okay. That was really what the agenda item spoke of. Then I guess we'd have to at some point select the chairperson,
And I
secretary.
think the committee.
Yeah, that sounds good, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, under new business number 1, discuss, consider, and vote to adopt financial resolutions and tax resolutions for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number 2, discuss and consider proposed farm viability ordinance amendment regarding crop farm definitions submitted by the Conservation Commission. Okay. I know we went back and forth. Can you just come up for 1 second? Because I know that we went back and forth on some of the modifications, and I didn't quite get the color coding to some degree on your amendments. Can you briefly state, I guess, the objective tonight on the changes?
And right,
Yes.
on the next one, it says schedule a workshop, right, for the 911. And I was going to suggest that we also lump that perhaps with this workshop too, because I think in order to do this justice, we want to do it in a workshop with the Conservation Commission.
If I could add,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I could add to that, the topic of amending the solar ordinances came up at the planning board meeting. Following the same hearing, we just had to continue. It was late in the night, and the planning board really didn't get a chance to get their input in, and I think they're operating under the assumption that there's going to be a workshop
Good.
jointly with the council. So.
The conservation?
That's right, the planning board.
Planning board,
That's
the
right.
planning board, the planning board is working on broader amendments to suggest to the council, and are operating under the assumption there's going to be another workshop that would discuss their recommendation. But my point is they haven't had the chance to do their recommendations yet.
No, I know that, but I'm talking about the farm viability ordinance as Harvey's speaking of.
Which they're worried about too, or.
But I think Kevin's speaking of solar.
Right.
That's totally separate.
We don't have any solar, we don't have any wind in this version of the ordinance.
So are you okay with maybe scheduling something?
Workshop time, whatever works for the council.
Maybe we can get into the nuts and bolts.
Okay, because I had a little trouble with
Yeah, so the definition, it made it sound like it was just a crop farm, it's really, that was the leading thing in the definitions for it, but the others were, the retail to expand the retail store space a bit for the large farms and that sort of thing. But, it's stuff that we worked on for the last year and a half.
Okay. Yeah, we'll schedule
with the farmers.
Yeah, we'll do that in the summer when it's not as busy.
Okay.
Not as busy for the farmers.
Harvey's not a farm.
Farmers are always busy, 24/7. It doesn't matter if it's winter
They don't do it
or
at 7
summer.
o'clock, do they?
Duties required.
Yeah, they do. Well, anyway.
Farmer's wife, anyway.
So anyway, sometime you
That
said
means
in
you
the
do a lot of
next
work.
couple of months, you ballpark.
Yeah, in the summer. We're gonna do it in the summer. That's what I'm thinking, unless you want to put it off to whatever. It's not.
No.
I would think sooner rather than later.
Okay, appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mark. Thank you. Okay, number 3. Consider scheduling a workshop to discuss the funding, purchase, and enactment of an ordinance of E91 locator signs to provide a means of locating residential, business, and other structures for expedient emergency responses by police, fire, rescue, and other emergency services. Chief Palmer. This item got on the agenda at the urging of a police commissioner. I was at the Hopkinton golf tournament, and they had mentioned that this was kind of percolating, and they wanted to kind of bring it forward. So I said, geez, I'll bring it forward for you, and here we are. So if you can just kind of give us an idea of what this is all about and what it entails.
It's kind of in a semi-workshop as it is. The police commission has worked with Sherry Sharp with this, trying to get this going. There's a need for it. I think you all recognize the need. Having placards that are visible at the end of their roads. I don't think I have to go in length on that. there's roads here, and there's houses here in Hopkinton that take the fire, police personnel much more time than they should. And I think this would be a valid thing to get going and start spearheading. The big problem is always going to be money. What was considered was making the placards. I know Sherry had gotten some quotes at $12 a placard. They're
You mean the little reflector that goes on the mailbox?
yeah,
Is a placard, and
Right,
it costs
placard.
$12 a piece.
$12 along with the pole. I think she got a pretty good, in my opinion,
Pole?
pretty
I
good
mean,
with
every
the
house
pole.
has a pole.
But you go back a couple of years now. This was before we've had aluminum and that's what it's made out of. So it may be quite a bit more than that now. So in any case, obviously funding is an issue. One of the things we thought, if we could get some funding between the fire departments, possibly the ambulance corps as well. We've spoken to Ron Spazzato and Justin Wade, both chiefs. They sound like they're interested in giving some money. There may be some restrictions there, but I think that if we're going to get a workshop, they probably should be included on that. I know that Sherry has sent a letter to 911, Gina Raimondo, the governor, and it got sent over to 911, hoping that they could help fund it. But the whole idea was to get a sum of money, buy approximately 1,000 of them, and have the residents come in and pay for them, and then that will fund a new 1,000 roof to replenish.
You're gonna force the residents to pay for them?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about forcing the
Yes.
residents to pay for them and forcing them to purchase it?
When this started in the 90s, the first time we had 911, okay, the town did purchase all the reflectors and how did we disperse them? People did not come in to get them. I believe they were sent out.
Just the house numbers, you said the
House numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's I just can't believe that we need a workshop to talk about the fact that at New Roads, we need those numbers on those mailboxes. And so that when an emergency goes out, they can see, oh, it's 31 and there it is, I see it. But a lot of people don't have those little reflectors. So it sounds like a mailing, but
Part of it was also to
you think you should
revamp
be
the
able to
ordinance.
work out
It's
in-house.
on the pole.
No,
It's just on the mailbox.
that's the way it was allowed before.
Some people don't get
Some, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
There's-
But if you have a mailbox, it could be on a mailbox.
And some people would, right.
And
Most people have a mailbox.
I think also the ordinance has to, it's been changed, but I think it may need to be tweaked a little bit, but it has to tell you exactly where you want those. Now remember, in Hopkinton, you come into sometimes you come into one driveway and it splits off to
Right.
5 or 6 of them. So we have to have an ordinance that addresses that.
Oh, I see your point.
And you also have to have it so that when you get into that driveway, that each one of those is, so I think each one of the ordinance has to explain that, where exactly they should be. And I don't think that any of us, police officers or firemen would be opposed to going out there if someone had any questions and showing them exactly where the best spot would be. But I think the ordinance has to explain that to them, because some of them have put them up in trees and they're not visible by where the lights hit them. So it becomes an issue.
Right.
Go on flies,
So I think the biggest problem is the funding portion.
Well, we can certainly tackle that in a workshop and whatever else we can deal with. I guess it's certainly, I think, a valid concern, and I think it's something we need to move forward.
We need a copy of the ordinance. It's not something that we've looked at
No,
more than 20 years. So, yeah, maybe we get us a copy.
The police commission has been kind of mulling this around and wanting it to move it forward, and I think it's a worthy cause. That's why I think we should do it. So we'll get together with Bill and figure out all the people that have to get reached out to, and we'll try and schedule something as soon as possible.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, Chief.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Next, number 4, discuss, consider, and vote on a resolution opposing pending legislation in the Rhode Island General Assembly requiring the indeterminate continuation of the terms and conditions of expired teacher collective bargaining agreements until such time as replaced by a newly executed collective bargaining agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Got me.
All right, we know that's
Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, number 5, discuss, consider, and vote to appropriate funds not to exceed $1,500 for 5 new meeting room chairs from Town Council contingency line item 5065-001. Which is topic? I have no idea.
Just out of, for like 3 or more years ago, we just briefly said we ought to get new chairs, and I said, I'll go out and look, and I never did.
Replace these
I
right here.
never did, yeah. And so I said to Barbara, a few council meetings back, you want to go out and go to the local place in Wesley, go look at some chairs and make a recommendation, so that's all. And Barbara's got the specs if you're interested.
Just from my perspective, I think, you guys know me by now. If I don't have to spend money, I won't. Now, if individual councilors feel better with the chair, I would support. I don't need one, nor do I think I should pay for that to have another one. I'm fine with the one I got for the next, whatever it was.
Another 10 years.
Whatever, so if somebody has an ailment that they feel they need a new chair, I would support that. But
Right.
$1,500 for 5 chairs, if you two ladies want one, fine, I'll support that. I don't need one.
My chair's filthy. I'm done.
I'm fine.
I'm done.
So if Sylvia and Barbara want one, I would support you guys having one, because if you feel you need one, fine. You've worked hard enough, that's fine. For me, I don't need it, I sit in the milk. Can I get one? I sit in the milk.
You gotta run for council.
That's kind of where I'm coming from, folks, so, if you ladies feel you want one, I would support that, but I don't need one. That's my 2 cents.
I don't need one.
I think it had to do with the fact that these chairs, the chairs are, I don't know if they're over 10 years old, but they are on a long time. They're used all the time. They don't go up and down. They will flip back and turn around.
Some do, some
Some of the chairs that they.
Oh, you go down, you can always go down.
Stand up, right?
Because some of the chairs had, reduces lower back tension. We were in these chairs for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And so we wanted just to look at chairs that were rated well and would give you reduced lower back pain, reduce the pressure back and knees for improved circulation, pneumatic seats that actually work, and then they tilt and they swivel, and they're supposed to do that. But it certainly helps with those of us and the planning board and zoning that can be in these chairs for 3 or 4 hours at a time. It's not like we are sitting in them for 10 minutes. So anyway, Sylvia and I thought, because these are really old, they are beginning to be quite bedraggled, and they don't all go up in bedraggled.
I like that word.
It is. But, we would like them to go up and down, but we also like of the chairs to have a better lower back support so you can lean backwards and not feel like you're suddenly flipping.
Or lean back and not slide.
Yeah, exactly.
In the interest of time,
Yes.
do you ladies want new chairs or not?
There should be 5 new chairs.
I don't want one.
It doesn't matter.
Well, they need to match. They need to.
Better cushions on the
And by the
benches.
way, these chairs are gonna get reused in town hall complex, so.
I don't need one.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, there were 3 that we sent out, and you could take a look at them. And we thought, that they have really good lumbar support, they can sustain weight, and they can move easily, and they're pneumatic, so you can actually, feel like you're sitting in a chair and you're not slouching while you're listening to people. Yeah, I do. I'm sure you do. So anyway, we thought because these are getting so old, it would be a good thing to just replace them. It's been, I don't even know how many years. Certainly 12, because I've been here 12.
I would support you too, if you need new chairs, I would support getting 2 new chairs, but
But the issue is you have to look at these chairs and tell us.
Well, I trust your judgment. If you find the mid-range chair and you want 2 new chairs, and if we see them at another meeting and we say, oh, geez, that was a really nice meeting.
No, that's not how it works.
Well, whatever. Well, I don't need one. So if you guys want one, I'll support it. But
All right,
that's
so
me.
I'd like
Tom,
to make
David
a-
may feel
all right,
different.
okay. Why don't, I'll just at least make a motion that we not exceed $1,500 for 5 new meeting room chairs for the town council, planning board, zoning board, for everyone who has to meet up at this time.
The issue is,
Not to exceed 1,500.
but which chair?
Oh, well, I haven't just.
Oh, we haven't got that.
No, just the motion
Oh, okay,
to
second.
second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
And actually, we don't need that much if you would select a chair, because you might select the least expensive one, which is two. And this has to follow the bid policy.
What was the middle?
231 was the lowest price.
Yeah, 231 is the,
Middle one?
But
this one, but it doesn't.
as soon as you select a chair, Lisa would go about fulfilling the bid requirements. She'd have to make some phone calls to see if we can get a better, even lower
This
price.
doesn't have lower back support, this is only 231. But it doesn't. This one does,
Yeah, the first one does.
We don't have, all right, so.
and the mesh one does.
Well, I'm not running again, so I'm staying right now.
You don't want to share.
I want to share with them.
All right, so motion was made and seconded. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on
Well,
the
it's
chairs?
an exciting vote now.
All those in favor of spending 1,500 for new,
Not-
up to 15,
not
up to 1,500 for 5 new chairs, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor signify by saying no. No.
No.
Okay, all right.
Abstain.
Won't bother.
Why don't you leave it up to the new council? Let them-
That's right. That's right.
Put them on the hot
It's
seat.
the other one, yeah, let's figure. But honestly, for both sides, I don't think it's fair for me to vote.
Motion to adjourn?